You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
We'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, July 9th, 2026, and I have about 7:01 p.m. We'll start by introducing members of the commission and staff. Commission member Joe Chadwick. Joe, are you here? And Joe, I think you're muted.
Joe Chadwick is present and unmuted.
Thank you, Joe. Fred Russo, Commission Member Fred, are you here?
Fred is here.
Thanks, Fred. Joe Vayuso. Joe, are you here?
Joe Vayuso, present.
Marcy Pelusi. Marcy, are you here?
Marcy's here.
Sharon Hutner. Sharon, you're here?
Sharon is here.
And Dave Dyer. Dave, you're here?
Dave Dyer is here.
And I'm Chuck Anders, Chair. Our staff this evening is our Acting Director of Planning, Jamie Frederick. Jamie, you're here?
Here.
Our Assistant Planner, Dan Robinson. Dan, are you here?
I'm here.
Our Town Attorney, Bill Anaskovich. Bill, you're here?
I'm here.
And our Clerk Recording Secretary is Michelle Martin. She's also lurking in the background, making sure the recording in the notes are being taken. So with that, I'm going to ask our Secretary, Fred Russo, to read the notice of public hearing.
Okay. Legal notice, special meeting, Town of Branford. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, July 9, 2026 at 7 p.m. by remote technology. Consider the applications listed below. Information regarding how to participate in the public hearings will be provided on the Commission's meetings agenda that will be posted on the town's website at least 24 hours prior to this meeting. Application ZAMD 26-1, zoning regulation amendments to comply with Public Act 25-1, middle housing and parking. Planning and Zoning Commission is the applicant. Application PZ-26-22, special exception for automotive repair, section 4.8.1.5, located at 16 East Industrial Road for an automotive repair facility. Jordan Gioia, applicant, 16 East Industrial Road, LLC owner. Application PZ-26-31, special exception for an accessory apartment located at 42 Orchard Road, Tyler Hodson, applicant and owner. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies are on file in the Planning and Zoning Commission office at the Planning and Zoning Department at 1019 Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, 06405. Written communications may be sent to the above address or to Planning and Zoning at branford-ct.gov. Branford Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairperson.
Thank you, Fred. We'll follow our normal format for public hearings, which is that the applicant go first, make its presentation, explain the application. After the applicant is through, we turn it over to the commission staff, typically hear a summary of a staff report, open it up for questions and comments from commission members and staff. After that, we have the public portion, and I'm going to ask our Dan, our assistant planner, to kind of go through the what you got to press and the process for participating in the public portion, and ask that you state your name and address for the public, make your comments. After the public portion, we allow the applicant to respond to any of the public comments. We may or may not close the hearing depending on how it goes. And with that, I'll ask Dan to review the process for the participation by applicants in the public when it's your time to do so.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you. If the computer that you're using has a microphone for two-way communication, when the public hearing is active, please press the raise hand button in the participant window. If you can't find it, I would click on the heart react button. Sometimes the raise hand button is hidden under there. When your hand is raised and we call on you, please state your name and address for the record, of course. If you would prefer to use the chat function during the public hearing, the same applies. Please state your name and address for the record. And then when that public hearing is closed, please refrain from typing in the chat. That being said, if you are just here at this meeting to listen in and not participate, provide testimony, you are free to use a pseudonym for your Zoom name. And if you do not have access to a computer, feel free to call into this meeting at 1-646-558-8656. And that is all.
And then we'll start with our first item, which is Heather Rumor, applicant, 1064 Main Street, LLC, JFA Management owner, 1032 1064 Main Street. This is a special exception for a change of use to limited retails. Applicant ready to proceed?
So I am Heather Rumor's business partner, Sean Flynn. Do you guys just want a description of what we're looking to do in the space differently?
Yes. Yeah, just click some of your application.
So we own Dovetail Custom Kitchens at 1036 Main Street, which is about 3 doors down from 1048, which is where we're applying for the zoning change or use type change. Essentially, what the space is going to be is an extension of our showroom. So we will show tile, wallpaper, faucets, more displays of cabinetry that we do sell. So really, it's just we've grown and we had the opportunity to take over the space, and now it's going to be an extension of our showroom.
Check in, sure. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. No Dan, I think you did the staff report on this one. You want to review that with us?
Yes, I'll go ahead and present that now. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're at 1032-64 Main Street, which is a range of addresses, but it's all under one building on Main Street, though they are separate commercial units. As Mr. Flynn mentioned, the Dovetail Custom Kitchens is located at 1036, 3 units to the left. The current use within that unit is limited retail, and they got a special exception, the same procedure as they're going through now, to get that limited retail use back in 2023. However, the unit that they're expanding into, 1048 Main Street, limited retail has never existed in that unit in the past. Therefore, the special exception to establish that use is required here. And also a sign permit is part of this special exception application as well. I should note that this property is within the Town Center Village District. They did have to go before the Town Center Revitalization Review Board, and they had a positive recommendation from them. What we're looking at here is the site plan. Outlined in yellow is the building, 1032-64, and then in red here is the unit they're looking to move into, 1048. Here is an image from Google Street View. As you can see, there's no business in there right now. This was from last year, last summer. They're looking to move into the one that says coffee shop above it right now. This is the signage that they proposed. The green background with the yellow lettering fits in with all the signs that are around it on that building and along that stretch on Main Street. This is the floor plan. It's a little bit of a long image, so I'll try and scroll through it. They have a few desks in the back, and then, of course, the display for the cabinetry. And there are other items on display. It's household appliances and cabinetry, things of that nature. So the limited retail use does fit for how they're planning to utilize the space. And then here is the entrance down here at the bottom. Our bulk requirements, not totally applicable to this application, as there's no exterior work. They're really just changing the interior. This application is really just centered around the use. But that being said, they do comply with the bulk requirements for the BC Business Center zone. In terms of parking, the applicable standards are for retail and service establishments And that stipulates that you need one parking space per 250 square feet of gross floor area. The previous use for this unit was general office, which has the same standard. Therefore, no new parking requirements are necessary, and the commission could not stipulate that they provide more. No grading and earth removal activities. Of course, all the work is reserved for the interior. The existing conditions are compliant for drainage and stormwater. This is really just an interior change. In terms of the special exception criteria is what we're really looking at tonight. The proposed use, in terms of its consistency with the plan of conservation development, it applies to section 9.2, which is keeping Branford Center vibrant. This use would be harmonious within the development of the area. The property lies in town center. This exact use already exists 3 doors down. So of course, an extension of that within the same larger building would be harmonious with the existing development patterns that are along that drag. The only exterior changes associated with this application are the signage, and as I demonstrated above, the applicant has provided a sign mock-up that matches the surrounding signs for the other businesses. In terms of impact to traffic, a switch from general office to limited retail, there is no expected additional traffic that would cause concern. And because this property is located in the town center, people may choose to walk to this establishment instead of utilizing their car. It's in a more walkable area in town. And in terms of our reviews, other departments I mentioned above, they had to go before the town center board, and they happily provided a recommendation for approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission for the change of use and the associated signage. They found it to be harmonious, the design of the sign and the use for the area of town that we're in. The staff is going to recommend that the commission approves this special exception and the associated signage. This use already exists 3 doors down. There's no new parking that's required as part of this application. And they have that support from the town center. And these are my findings and conditions. The commission finds, based on the testimony application materials presented, that the proposed limited retail use and the associated signage would be consistent with the special exception requirements. And the only condition that, like the other unit, this special exception only applies to this particular unit that's being applied for, 1048 Main Street.
Understand. Thank you, Dan. Questions or comments from commission members or staff before we open it up to the public? Hearing none, let's go ahead and open it up to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this application? Dan, just give a quick reminder. What do they got to press?
The raised hand button in the bottom middle of your screen. If you can't find it, please just unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record so we can know who's about to testify.
So do you see anyone, Dan or Jamie?
I do not.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any public comment on this. Does the applicant wish to make any further comments, Mr. Flynn?
I don't believe so.
Okay, and any additional comments from commission members or staff? Hearing none, then we will close this matter as a public hearing, and this may be something we can address later on in our meeting. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. That brings us then to item number 2 of our public hearings, which is Wayne Cook, trustee of the FC Cook Trust, applicant owner 596 East Main Street, Wayne Cook and Catherine Marie Cook, applicants owners of 612 East Main Street, NFW Associates, applicants and owners of 616 East Main Street. This is at 596, 612, and 616 East Main Street. This is a special exception application for a hospital and also an application for associates grading under section 6.8. We opened this public hearing at our last meeting, And I believe there are a number of items that we had asked for additional comments. I think conservation easement, sidewalk, and there were some lighting and sewer questions and a few other WPCA and a few other details. So with that, is the applicant ready to proceed?
We are, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Nuff, 42 Cherry Street, Milford, Connecticut, on behalf of Encompass Health Connecticut Real Estate LLC, which is the contract purchaser of the property. Just as a quick reminder, it consists of 20.63 acres. It's located in IG2 zone. This is a application for an inpatient rehabilitation hospital treating those recovered from serious injury or illness, including stroke, traumatic brain injury, and spinal cord and orthopedic injuries. We initially proposed 50 beds in phase 1 and additional 30 beds in phase 2. Quick reminder, our wetland application was unanimously approved, and it also included a condition of providing a conservation easement to the satisfaction of your staff, Jamie, as well as the town attorney. We're proposing a total of 8% building coverage where 30% is permitted, and 22% impervious coverage where 60% is permitted. With me this evening is Eric Lindquist from Ty & Bond, our professional engineer, our architect, who we also heard from last time, Eddie Alonso from Gretchen Smith, and Tom Wasmer is our traffic engineer filling in for Craig Giannis. I don't think we need to get to traffic, but he's here if there's any questions that arise. So let me give you a recap of what we've done since last time. We have filed our WPCA application, and Eric has had email exchanges and I think a telephone call with John Hufferly. So we don't see any concerns with regard to getting WPCA approval. We have submitted phase 2 floor plans, phase 2 elevations. We have revised our site plan to add notes regarding phase 2. It's about as simple of phasing as possible. It's simply replacing grass with that second phase. We provided an updated photometric plan that shows the building lighting as well. So we continue to comply with your lighting regulations. We have added the required 10% of parking spaces. We're providing EV infrastructure. And I think Eric is happy to talk about the depth of soil with regard to where the trees are going to be located. But if you want to skip over that, he's confident that there will be sufficient depth of soil. And to the extent that ledge might be encountered, it would be a simple, shifting of a location. But he's very confident, and he's happy to talk about it. But I'm just trying to make this. So let's talk about the conservation. We are required to provide a conservation easement in accordance with our inland wetland approval. I told you last time I have had good conversations with Julie Wagner from the Land Trust. I have had another really productive conversation with her, and we don't see any issues. But we are obligated to give a conservation easement either to the Land Trust or to the town. The thing that was raised last time was whether or not we would acknowledge the trail. As we all know, there is on the ground a trail that runs along the river. It hasn't been memorialized or recorded in the land records in any way. Importantly, after a lot of consideration, my client is willing to include in the conservation easement to the land trust provision for the trail. I've been spoken to Attorney Aniskovic about this, and he has assured me that because this is under the auspices of the Branford Planning and Parks and Recreation Department, that there is an indemnity for property owners over whose property the trail goes. And so that was obviously an important component for my clients. And so after very careful consideration, they have agreed, subject to, further review and confirmation as to the indemnity, to provide for the trail, as well as making provision for someone from the land trust to park in our parking lot, walk down to the conservation easement, access that, and make sure that there's nothing untoward going on. And we're very confident that given the status of that property and the condition of that property, that it will be maintained in its current configuration for, forever, frankly, not just for the foreseeable future, but it will be conserved, and so nothing will be taking place on that property. So I think that puts to bed the conservation easement. We will continue working with the land trust and Attorney Oskovich and with Jamie to finalize that once we have all of our approvals. The last question was with regard to the sidewalk. I told you last time we are willing to provide an easement to the town for the construction of an easement. I know there's some discussion regarding whether it was required or not. It's my view that because the regulation refers to the POCD, the POCD is a guidance document, and there are different tiers of priorities of sidewalks in the POCD, and it is not a strict requirement. I think given the context of the fact that we have a large wetland on our western property border, we have a fairly large pond on the eastern border, that making provision for an easement or a sidewalk to be constructed at a later date is sufficient for complying with, to the extent that there is a requirement with regard to sidewalks, you will comply with that. There's other opportunities in the area. It is unclear from reading the POCD, for instance, if everyone on both sides of every road that's identified is going to have to construct a sidewalk. And I think that sort of points out the nebulous nature or the vague nature of the sidewalk preference, I'll call it. So we're happy to discuss anything in depth. Eddie Alonso, as I said, our architect is here. He can walk you through the floor plan or the elevations of phase 2 if you think that's required. And Eric is happy to answer any questions as well.
Chuck in his chair. Thank you, Mr. Nuff. First, I know that we had a couple commission members who were unable to make the last meeting. Fred Russo. Fred, have you had a chance to review the tape of the last meeting?
I have. Yes.
Yes. So you've reviewed that tape?
Yes, I have.
Excellent. Okay. And Marcy Pelosi. Marcy, how about you? Have you had a chance to review the tape?
Yes, I'm actually trying to study the planting plan since you singled me out for knowing plants. So I think I'm up to speed on that as well.
Okay, great. So with that, let's turn it. I just want to get that on the record. So does staff have additional comments? I know, Jamie, you did the report on this. Do you have additional comments on, I know you had a number of details you'd raised in your initial staff report as well.
Sure, Jamie Frederick, acting director. So I did not do an updated staff report. Materials came in yesterday afternoon and today. I did have a chance to take a quick look at them. I will note the one other, I was taking notes on the things from the last meeting. The one main thing I noted wasn't touched on is East Shore District Health Department, which makes sense since I followed up with the East Shore District Health Department just to make sure they didn't have any pertinent comments relative to the regulation requirement for a report from them. The local health district doesn't have any jurisdiction over the location of this facility. Their jurisdiction would pertain purely to any food service at the facility, and that would be reviewed at a later date. No further comments from them. And I think that Nuff has spoken to a lot of the points that I had kind of open-ended in the staff report as of its last writing.
Okay. And I understand you just got some stuff yesterday and today. Is that right, Jamie?
Yeah, so I think that was outlined by Attorney Nuff. We have received a revised floor plan, architecturals, and phasing site plan regarding phase 2. I will note, and I didn't have a chance to let the applicant note this, but I did notice that the EV infrastructure is noted to be installed in the phase 2 area, where as it should probably be located in phase 1. That's probably something that could be handled by a condition if the commission was comfortable with that. We did receive a revised lighting plan. And as noted, the commission wants additional information regarding the appropriate soil conditions for the planting plan that can be provided by project engineer. I think that's, oh, and we did receive a copy of the WPCA application that was submitted.
Okay, thanks. Can I, Mr. Anaskovich, can I ask you a question? There was a question that Mr. Nuff gave an opinion about the sidewalk issue, that since it refers to the plan of conservation development, which I think does locate this as a sidewalk area, but that the plan, the PLCD is itself an advisory document, that therefore it is also a recommendation, but not an obligation. Or do you have do you agree with his interpretation, or what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Chuck. Bill Anaskowicz, Brenner Saltzman, Town Attorney. I do to an extent agree with Attorney Nuff, and I would characterize it, and I think he raises a legitimate point that I think is important for the commission to recognize. I believe that Section 6.15D does contain mandatory language. The operative regulation says sidewalks shall be required along major highways. The second part of your definition, however, which you can't ignore, is in accordance with the Plan of Conservation and Development and Transportation. And so while the language of the regulation is mandatory, it doesn't specify the particulars of implementation. Those particulars would include the exact time of construction, the required width, alignment, grade, materials, whether the compliance could take the form of an immediate build out or could be deferred, or how the commission should proceed where site constraints make immediate construction less practical. I think it's important that in this case, he notes also that the wetlands and the pond, which directly impact the area where the sidewalk would be called for, make this a much more difficult and challenging situation that would suggest that a deferred approach to implementation that could be accomplished through an easement would be a more advisable way for the commission to go. And so I would not want to argue that Section 6.15D isn't obligatory. I think it's mandatory. I think shall means shall. But I also think it's a two-part definition. And I think that the implementation aspect of the definition is left open-ended, and it refers to a document, the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is in effect a conceptual and corridor-oriented, not site-specific or parcel-specific document. The POCD says that the map identifies some potential sidewalk priority areas. Potential. It says your Plan of Conservation and Development says potential sidewalk priority areas. It defines priority 3 as areas within a quarter of a mile of a transit route. It then goes on to say that the anticipated pedestrian bicycle committee will update and refine this map, suggesting that over time, the question of where sidewalks would be located or would be advisable is something that is going to change or could potentially change over time. All of that precise language is super important because it shows that the POCD's pedestrian network is a planning framework and not a fully engineered frontage by frontage mandate. All of that, I think, supports the idea that where you have a situation in which a set of constraints related to a particular parcel make immediate implementation challenging or difficult, the more advisable route is to go the easement route. And I believe that we could work with staff to develop a condition that would satisfy the obligatory nature of 6.15, as well as provide for an opportunity for us to work out how to best do this most efficiently and most effectively going forward, given the site constraints.
Thank you, Mr. Anaskowicz. I sort of have two questions with respect to that. One is the big issue is, I think on the adjacent property we did require sidewalks. My concern is that if we require it for one, we need to have some consistent policy. On the other hand, I do also recollect that in the past, and I have to go way back, and Joe Viuso, if you're listening, I don't know if you go way back, I'm pretty sure that we have deferred that requirement in the past. That we say 5 years or so, gone up to 5 years as to when you would have to do that. The question I have is that if we require it for someone else, and not just we get an easement, but they actually do it, that there be some either deadline to do it or some funding to do it. So those are my concerns. Otherwise, it seems to me you're creating precedent that and I understand that there's site constraints about wetlands and so forth. And to me, that's a reason for deferring it, or just so they can occupy it. And there may be other things that may have to happen to make it feasible. But my reluctance is to just say an easement here only here could also be a negative precedent. And I know we did receive some testimony at the last public hearing requesting the sidewalks, from the bicycle committee and so forth. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just to your 2 points. First, I think you've articulated the basis for making the distinction between different applications, and that has to do with site constraints. I think that the record of the inland wetlands public hearings amply demonstrate the constraints that are imposed on this site that aren't present in other places where you've simply required immediate implementation. The question here is not whether, but how, and I think that should turn on site specific and properly documented constraints, and I think that those exist here and would support a deferred implementation. Secondly, I 100% agree that we should not characterize or draft an easement condition in a way that undermines the mandatory nature of the language. Again, this is an implementation question, not a question of whether or not we are obligated to impose a sidewalk requirement. But I do think that there is enough evidence on the record, in my opinion, to defend a deferred approach that we could accomplish through an easement with triggers, as you've articulated, Chairman Andres, that we could work out. I think we could condition the easement based on satisfaction to staff and town council, and we could work through that for purposes of developing a resolution that would be satisfactory to the extent that the commission felt that was appropriate.
Certainly, and we'll get some more questions in a bit, I'm sure, here, and we hear what other commission members think. But where are the wetlands? Is the whole frontage an issue, or is it just part near the wetlands? Where's the particular issue? Jamie, maybe you can help us with that.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick. So there's a pond on the eastern portion of the site. You did comment about the abutting property having sidewalk. You can see a little stub to the west of the driveway going into the YMCA property. And then we've got this pond, which I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see that there's a pole that would be in the way of the sidewalk continuing straight. And then if the sidewalk were to continue straight, it would also have some direct wetland impact. There's this other existing stormwater structure that provides some complications. And then I believe on the west side, the applicant has indicated that some of the topography makes it a little bit challenging. In addition to, there's another wetland set further back that's still somewhat in proximity to where the sidewalk would go, but would likely not have direct wetland impact associated with a sidewalk installation.
Okay. So there is a chunk where there is no wetlands, it sounds like, but I understand on either side, mostly on one side, it sounds like there's the site constraints. Okay, and there's some topography issues there. Okay, well, that's something we can review further. Let's questions and comments from commission members before we open it up to the public. Who do we got? Sharon, I see your hand up.
Yep, Sharon Hutner here. I'm not an engineer and I don't know whether this is feasible, but I have been in places where there have been boardwalks that have been constructed over wetlands and connected with sidewalks. I'm sure the architects in the room can respond to whether that's feasible or not, but it's just a suggestion.
Chuck Hender's here. Thanks, Sharon. Other questions, comments from commission members? Marcy?
I'm looking at the plan now, and there's the property 620 East Main Street, which seems to not be part of the project, that is situated, has access before the pond, before you get to the Y. So is that owned by Encompass? And why would we be requiring them to put sidewalks on an area that isn't their property? And then if you look to the far west of their site, I mean, I just got through going up and down the street on Google Maps, and the western part of the site is very steep as it relates to the road, and with the wetland on that side, it's kind of like a sidewalk to nowhere. What I was focusing more on is where the bus stop locations were, and whether the 100 or so staff would be taking the bus to this property, or would they be driving, and is there a need to have a bus stop in front of the property, more so in my mind than a sidewalk? Because there's also the space across the street that the grade is much more appropriate for sidewalks. And if the purpose of the sidewalk is to be tied to public transportation, then we have to look at where the bus stops are located on the plan relative to that. So, I don't know what the distance is between stops, but to me, the only reason people would be walking on the sidewalk would be to get from the property to a bus stop. So couldn't we just alleviate that by putting in some kind of small bus, stop as an additional stop? It doesn't take long. The bus sees if there's somebody there or not, and they either keep going or they don't, you know. So that was one question. And then the other question I have is, I noticed that there was the permeable pavers, and I don't know where those are located on the plan. And then the interior design on the south side, I wasn't sure what that was depicting, whether that was some sort of, paved area with some kind of cover or raised area, or whether that was mechanical equipment in the courtyard of the building. And then lastly, I love that you created a use for I know what kind of pond it was. I won't, I know the history on that. You're definitely creating an environmental use where there was none. I just, and I did look at the planting plan, and I do understand the storm drainage. I think the question would be, I know there's, a good amount of grade between the Fort Bay, and you had to deepen the pond for the storm counts and all that, but, is there a way to soften the grade so that the fence isn't required, so that we can have it be a more environmentally, a more environmental water quality basin, as opposed to just, wrapping a 4-foot fence to keep everybody out of the retention area? And I know that standard civil engineering practices to fence it, but I just find that to be quite ugly if we can avoid it. I would love to see some creative thinking in that vein. And those were really my questions.
Thanks, Marcy. Does the applicant want to respond to any of those questions right now?
Sure. My guess is Eric can address the pond issues. And I know that Commissioner Paluzzi said that she had listened to our first night of our hearing. I would tell you, just as a reminder, that the pond and now the stormwater basin was something that was, frankly, the focus of 75% of the hearing. It was carefully scrutinized not only by staff, but also by the Wetland Commission's peer reviewer, and they, frankly, thought it was a brilliant idea to repurpose the pond into a stormwater basin, including the manner in which Eric had proposed. In terms of the rest of the stormwater discussion, I'll let Eric respond to that.
If I could interject, I don't disagree with any of that, John.
Okay.
I just know how things get engineered, and I know it's just a barrier for wildlife, and I'm just wondering if there's a way to take that volume and not have such a controlled steep edge to perhaps, and I know it's probably a wetland issue, so it's probably for not. I say this more for all projects than just this one, because it's a personal pet peeve I have between engineering and the other. But it would be nice if it wasn't just a straight slope to get to the depth that you need for the volume. And I do I did review the planting plan. I think the planting plan is excellent. And, you know, my response to the, native plantings versus not, I would just remind people that it's farmland and you're introducing a very large amount of species that are going to help the um, biodiversity of the site where it was once cleared space. And so, I just wanted to kind of add some perspective on what the project was giving back environmentally.
So Eric Lindquist, for the record, Eric Lindquist, Senior Project Manager and Senior Associate at Time Bond, licensed engineer in the state of Connecticut. So to answer the question on the fence is there primarily for safety. It is obviously people can just run into the fence. There's all sorts of issues with it. So it's there for liability concerns and everything else. To address your concern about the wildlife, that was actually a comment that was raised during the wetland hearing. And one of the things we volunteered to do is raise the bottom of the fence up so it's not right to the grass. So I believe there's a 12-inch clear under it. I can find the detail. But that allows like a lot of the smaller animals to get in there. A deer can easily hop over a 4 or 6 foot fence, whatever it is. So wildlife will have access to the pond. Birds obviously will. So that was thought about and contemplated. So that was addressed as part of it. The question about the court. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is that good to know? I didn't realize that.
Okay. So in terms of the courtyard, I just want to bring up the landscape plan, make sure I'm understanding the question. Was your concern what this space is right here in the center here?
I'm on I just didn't know what that space was. I was just trying to read the plan. I could tell that the north space was like a walkway with benches, and I assumed the left part, I just didn't know what that right portion of that was.
So this area here, if you can look at the project in Danbury, it's a similar type thing. It's the same scenario. Essentially what that is it's a therapy courtyard. It's like a ramp. It's for physical therapy. So there's steps and ramps and things like that to help them and get them out there and exercise, and it's outdoors because that's better for therapy and all sorts of stuff. So it's used in the therapy being done at the building.
Oh, good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Any thoughts on the bus stops?
The bus stop.
Go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say there is a bus stop right across from the YMCA. It's on the other side of the road. So I don't know if they'd be willing to accept another stop a couple hundred feet down. So that's the problem. But you're right. The sidewalk would be better on the side of the bus stop and, to get access to site, but I'll let John continue on that. Sorry.
No, thanks, Eric. I'm just going to say what Eric just told you, that there is a bus stop on the opposite side of the road. But then I think you also mentioned whether our employees would be taking the bus. So what we described in the context of our traffic discussion, that you have 2 shifts. One is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The other is from just after 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. The majority of the shift, of course, is they're coming at 7 a.m. That means they're getting there at, 6:45. My suspicion is, and I certainly can't attest to this, but that if you're working a 12-hour day, adding a bus trip on either side of that is probably unlikely. So, we anticipate that the vast majority of employees are going to be arriving via their own vehicle. But by the way, I before we forget, Jamie had mentioned about the EV spaces being part of phase 2. Actually, the parking lots, the entire parking lot will be constructed as part of phase 1. The only construction that will take place as part of phase 2 is the actual building where we're adding those 30 beds. EV spaces and the infrastructure will be there from the very beginning, and they're located there because that's where our transformer.
So you would have no problem saying that it's part of phase 1, the EV component?
100%. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, right. Okay. Great.
Where's the permeable parking located? Or permeable, it's one of the details you had for, you were adding structure to can't find the words, to the ground with the permeable plastic. You let the grass grow through and it provides...
I'm sorry. I was wondering what you were talking about when you were mentioning that. So I could share my screen for that as well. 1 second.
Yeah, it's on
That's
detail.
reinforced turf.
Exactly. Yes,
so
thank you.
That is for access to the pond. So
Okay, that's the vehicular access. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's vehicular access for maintenance vehicles to get down there, so you're not just driving across grass and ripping it up.
Gotcha.
And, sorry, Jamie Frederick, I was just going to say, relative to that plan, it looked like you were just showing the phased plan. So you were just commenting that the only portion that would be phased would was the building, because I was a little
Correct.
bit confused by the extent of the bubbling around
Yeah,
it, which I see
I-
also includes the comments, so,
Right.
okay.
All the revisions were clouded, but the phase two portion is just the hatched area of the building, and that's it. And that's just going to be, I mentioned that's going to be grass when it's not building, and once the building comes, it's no longer grass. And the
Okay.
17 spaces just so happen to fit perfectly here. It's right near the transformer. It's easier to supply electricity there, so we felt that's probably the best place for them.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Other questions, comments from commission members before we open it up to the public?
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Fred.
Yeah, I'd like to, not to get in too deep, but I agree with what Marcy said and also what Attorney Skovich said. I also have not been around as long as Joe Vayuzo. I think you two guys are the oldest on the commission, but I do recall several applicants that came before us where the sidewalks, there was an easement for the sidewalks for one reason or another, but it wasn't hard and fast that they had to be done or not had to be done. I think what Attorney Skovich said is true. I said, we have rules, regulations, and whatever, and sometimes they don't necessarily fit the topography of the property. And I think that's our job, is to refine the regulations. I'm not saying break them, but there are ways to navigate them, I guess is a good way to say it, and navigate those regulations so that the project goes on and without just turning our back on what we want done. So I agree with both with Bill and Skovich and Marcy on their view and their opinions on this project in general. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Fred. Other questions, comments before we open it up to the public? Hearing none, then let's see. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this further? Any members of the public?
I have Judith Miller. Go ahead.
Yes, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude for the inclusion of the Branford Trail right-of-way with the conservation easement. That was made an official state greenway in 2023, and it's a real gem. It's wonderful that we're going to be able to make that legal. I wanted to comment on the sidewalk. I had understood that there was a bus stop at the Chowder Pot corner. I guess I'm wrong.
There is.
But my concern is that people who use bus stops and who need to walk are underserved. I like the idea that we have the sidewalk at the Y. If we could have one that included being in front of this hospital, and then if something is done with the Chowder Pot and we could have a sidewalk there, you'd have a place where people could walk safely to work, staff members could walk safely to work, visitors could walk safely to visit patients in the hospital. So I'm just a strong advocate for including the sidewalk. My concern is that if it's just something that can be put off till the future, it'll never happen.
Judith, could we have your address
I'm
for the
sorry.
record, please?
1 Indian Neck Avenue. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No problem.
Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? Okay.
Once again, please.
Yes.
If you had testimony, press the raise hand button, and if you can't find it, just unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else. I think the applicant's engineer mentioned that there's a bus stop across the street from the Y, and taking Marcy's cue, I did look at Google Maps and, Street View, and you can see that there is a bus stop. It shows the location. It's across from the Y, and it's sort of past the driveway further down. So I think anyone that gets off that bus is going to cross the street, and there is a sidewalk right there. And they would, if they were going to this facility, they would walk on the sidewalk that is already there on the Y that goes to the edge of the property. And then you get to the wetlands and the pond, which is a problem. I get that. And there's got to be some way around that. But then, after that, there is a lot of the property. It still seems like there is areas where the site constraints don't exist. That there are parts of the property, at least, that you could put a sidewalk on, but and again, my issue is that we are requiring for the adjacent property owners, but I understand because of site constraints, there could be limitations that could be addressed either by delaying the period or, getting an easement or something else. But anyway, though, I'm just mentioning that as well. I wanted to add that to the record because I did take a look to see that where that bus stop is and that there is sidewalks right across the street from that. And if you go to your property, you're going to walk on those sidewalks. So thank you for that. Marcy. Marcy, you're muted.
My Google Maps shows the bus stop across from the existing, the old pipe, the old, I forget what it was called, where the original farm was, Bishop's Farm. Is it Bishop's or is it, I forget the name. And then another one on the
Hilltop.
same Hilltop, thank you, God. And then another one on the same side of the street as the Y. But nobody answered, and maybe I missed it, who owns the pond, because it looks like it's still owned by the trust, the Cook Trust.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I'll correct that. And I'm sorry to interrupt. But no, so yes, the property is currently owned by that property owner, but it is under contract to us. So
Okay. So you would be responsible for making that connection at the pond, but I do, looking at the grade and driving along the street from Google Maps, the grade does appear much more even on other ends for across the street for a sidewalk to occur. That's just my opinion. And there does look like there's a bus stop that's not directly across from the Y, but that they're staggered. So, obviously it's for the flow, whichever direction you're coming from. But it anybody taking the bus, it will lead to them crossing the street. And I would just ask people to think about, you know, they're not walking from one parcel to the next. They're taking the bus and getting off a bus stop. So if the bus stops are frequent enough that they can get to the major users with the crossing situation, that to me is more the way I'm thinking about the need for a sidewalk, not, and the site conditions, not walking, it's where the bus stops are driving it. Sorry, I'm babbling, but go ahead.
Thank you, Marcy. I did notice one raised hand, Lauren Brown. Ms.
Yeah.
Brown, do you have a comment?
Yes. This is in relation to what Commissioner Hutner mentioned about boardwalks. Just yesterday, I was down in Milford, in the Milford Point area, Milford Point Road, and there's a sidewalk, and then there's a salt marsh, a tidal wetland, and there's a boardwalk that crosses the tidal wetland and then joins a sidewalk on the other end. And I actually saw somebody walking on it too. So just wanted to pass along that information.
Chuck and sure. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Okay, I think that's, we've heard from the public. Are there comments? Mr. Nuff, additional comments from your team?
I think we're good, Mr. Chairman. As always, we appreciate the staff's and the commission's diligence and attention to our matter. As I said at the very beginning, and I still believe this, I haven't heard anyone tell me I'm wrong, it is impossible to come up with a better use in this zone than what we propose, with zero downside whatsoever. And we will pledge to work with your staff and with your town attorney and resolve the sidewalk issue. I don't think there's any danger, given the quality of your staff and your town attorney, that we will continue to work with them closely and make sure that there is provision for the things that we discussed, not only the trail, but also figuring out the sidewalk as well. I'm not concerned about precedent. It's sort of interesting. We were talking about this the other day, Mr. Chairman, that, we often hear about people saying, well, if we do this, it'll set a precedent. I have never once uttered precedent. I've never heard another person say, well, you did it here, so you have to do it there. Maybe it happens on a different level, but I think with the adequate drafting of easement to the town for the sidewalk, you can ensure that the only precedent they'll be pointing to is something that the town will be having. So again, I appreciate all your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Nuff. Other comments from commission members or staff before at this time? Hearing none, then I think we can close this matter as a public hearing. We can talk about it a little bit. We're not going to vote tonight because we want to get a good resolution and there's, give some direction to staff. But I think hopefully we can have a discussion and then see how we want to frame it. And then with the expectation that probably at our, we have a written resolution for our next meeting that we could vote on. So
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nuff. Okay, so that brings us then to item number 3, which is SZ&I LLC, applicant and owner, 16 Business Park Drive. This is a special exception for a retail store in section 4.8A. And I understand this application has been withdrawn. Is that correct? Why does someone, Branford Land Trust, with a hand raised? What is that?
Well, just a point of clarification. Will you be the Encompass application? Will you be discussing it further tonight, or are you finished?
Yes, we may talk about it further. We're not going to vote on it,
right,
but we'll talk about some of the details a little bit more.
And so, that will be after all the other public hearings?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
We'll bring them back up.
Yeah, thank you.
You betcha. Right. Okay, so item number 3 has been withdrawn. Is that correct, Jamie and Dan?
Yes.
Okay, so now we can move on to item number 4, which is a Planning and Zoning Commission is the applicant. This is a zoning regulation amendments to comply with Public Act 25-1, middle housing and parking. And Jamie, are you going to review that with us?
Yeah, Jamie Frederick. So I did do a last minute presentation that I can share with the commission. I will also note that there were some modifications that staff made in response to just kind of further consideration of what the statutes were, and also in response to some internal comments we received from other departments. We did send out notification to the COG. We got a pretty generic letter back, basically saying that they didn't take any issue with the proposed regulation amendments. And we did send it to DEEP. We did not receive comments from DEEP. And just wanted to point out that the initial drafting of the regulation amendments was done with Tyche, as they were working with us in a consulting role. So I'll jump into the presentation and we'll go ahead. Ready. All right. So the main things that are being proposed to modify are relative to what the statute's called middle housing and parking requirements. The middle housing pertains to the business districts. So since we would be looking at increasing residential use in business districts, I did think it was pertinent to take a quick look at the impervious surface area definition and include patios and paved walkways, since those are things that we largely see associated with residential uses, and help codify that those impervious surface areas are in fact impervious. That's the first change. The second group of changes is to housing related terms. All of the definitions on the left side.
The public hearing is closed. They're going to be.
I think somebody's not muted.
Yes. Branford Land Trust, please mute yourself. Thank you.
So all of the comments on the left-hand side were existing and remain unchanged. All of the definitions on the right side in the blue box were added, and they're added in alignment with section 8.1A of the Connecticut General Statutes. We did get some comments from the building official pointing out that they didn't align with the building code, which unfortunately there's not a lot we can do about differences in drafting at the state level. Another new term that we're proposing to add is a definition for summary review, as the state statutes require that middle housing be reviewed by summary review. So we're looking to establish what that process is. And we're looking to define it as a process of reviewing an application for site plan approval without requiring a public hearing to be held, a variance or special exception be granted, or some other discretionary zoning action be taken, other than a determination that such site plan is in conformance with the applicable zoning regulations and that the public health and safety will not be substantially impacted. And I kind of copied the most relevant part of the statute below for your reference. So section 4 is our business districts. We are proposing to modify districts, center business district, mixed use district, restricted business, local business, and local business hybrid to align with the statute modification. We are not proposing any changes to the general industry IG1 or IG2. We're also not proposing any changes to Commerce Park, as industry zones are excluded from the mandate. The changes we are looking to make are to adjust the purpose to help align with what the nature of the statute is, and we just changed lot area per unit to lot area per dwelling unit for clarification. And we also added lot area per dwelling unit where it was not defined in the districts which were modified. So the modifications that were made to specific districts include restricted business. We just added to the purpose under 4.3A, creating a harmonious mixed use district to kind of help codify the residential aspect. Modification to local business district. Again, we added mixed use to codify that residential component. Also, there was no defined area for lot area per dwelling unit. So we applied 4,000 square feet, which is essentially I think it's the lowest standard that we had for a business district, just to have a number. Local business hybrid rear. Again, minor modification to the purpose to insert mixed use. And again, we defined the lot area per dwelling unit at 4,000 square feet, where none existed previously. Section 4.8, our table of residential uses. We made a couple of modifications to align with the statute changes. We took the multifamily and replaced it with multifamily 10 units or more, which remains unchanged. And then we added middle housing 2 through 9 dwelling units with a reference to a newly created section that outlines the review process for middle housing. And we defined it as site plan approval in all the districts in which it would be applicable. As you know, IG1, IG2, and CP, it's not permitted. We did remove 2 family dwellings since it's within middle housing. I think that summarizes the differences there. So the other aspect of the changes are parking. So there was the addition of a parking needs assessment for Connecticut General Statute 83N. So what we did was we took our existing 6.5D section outlined in this red box, and we added a number 4 regarding parking needs assessment. I won't go into reading the full thing, but essentially it allows for a developer to provide an assessment that speaks to the needs for the parking on site for consideration by the commission in regards to review of parking compliance. And then parking requirements, we did update the parking requirement table because there was also a change that essentially any residential use with 16 or less dwelling units cannot have minimum parking requirements. So we again kind of regrouped things to align with that number. It is different than the middle housing number. So multifamily dwellings 2 to 6 units, no parking is required. And then 17 units or more, we keep the parking requirements the same as they were before. And then I again copied the statute that pertains to this slide and the previous slide regarding those parking changes. And then this is section 9.16. It's a new section that we are proposing to help outline the process for reviewing a middle housing project. So we start off with the intent of the section and the applicability. So this would apply to developments that include between 2 and 9 residential units contained within 1 or more buildings when proposed in zones as outlined in section 4.8. So it's going to be middle housing, which is residential containing 2 to 9 dwelling units, and mixed use developments that contain 2 to 9 residential units and 1 or more commercial, public, institutional, retail, office, or industrial uses. And then we just note that mixed use developments containing 10 or more residential units are governed elsewhere in the regulations. Section 916C goes over the procedure, specifies that applications must submit certain information for the commission's review and consideration, kind of high level in this location. And we get into more detail further in the section. I think that it's important to note in particular that Town Center Village District and Stony Creek Village District review would still apply. And the statute does carve out for the commission can deny an application when a substantial adverse impact on public health or safety is determined. To kind of help ensure that there's some criteria, given that this is to be a non-discretionary process, we've outlined some design criteria, including the building materials, and I'm just going to kind of quickly flip through these. Roof materials, building elements, roof types, unit configuration, utility and mechanical appurtenances, and then we also get into some specific site layout and design. Parking shall not be located in the front or side yard. Non-residential uses are subject to parking requirements. So if it is mixed use, those commercial uses still need to provide the parking requirements as outlined in section 6.5. We are proposing a modification to how the front setback or from the front setback, so that essentially any new building would be situated on the site relative to the buildings on either side of it to kind of keep a uniform visual from the street. Landscape design. So the landscape regulations do apply, but we do also have some specific requirements that we outline in section 9.16 for specific to middle housing. I think the biggest difference here is I think there's slightly more plantings required along the frontage and between residential and commercial uses. And then also I think that the foundation plantings is more codified here than in the new revised landscape regulation. Lighting, again, we referenced to our typical lighting section 6.7. We did also include language that has commonly been added to permits as conditions of approval that specify that fixtures have to be full cutoff, not adjustable, that the color temperature needs to be considered and shall be equal to or less than 3,000 Kelvin. Stormwater drainage, again, we're deferring to section 6.9, but we're also specifying as requested by the town engineer that section 6.9 shall apply if post-development impervious surface ratios exceed pre-development proposal conditions. So if there's an increase in impervious surface, they have to provide drainage information for section 6.9. Open space and resident amenities, proposing that at least 500 square feet of green space shall be provided on the lot for each unit proposed. And refuge areas shall be provided. And then we do have building design examples for developers' considerations, and additional standards for the center business and restricted business districts, where a project concerns the redevelopment of a building with an existing storefront, then 50% of the ground floor along the public right-of-way shall be maintained for commercial uses such as retail, food, or indoor recreation to help keep that walkable commercial corridor available. And then 9.16H, administrative adjustments. This is the carve out we have for modifying any of the criteria above, should any of them not be obtainable for specific development for any particular reason. So that's a quick run through everything. Any questions?
Joe Chadwick speaking. Why do we feel like we need to inflict an opinion in architectural design?
So, Jamie Frederick, the reason why we proposed design criteria again is because this is a non-discretionary process. So if the commission wants to have any say in what the design looks like, you would need to have it codified in the regulations. So we kind of tried to put a whole package together that was generally the minimum. That is, I would say, not something that's essential for the commission to adopt to comply with the state statutes. It would be something the commission could choose to adopt if you thought it was important to your review of these applications.
Yeah, honestly, I think they are so problematic. I mean, I'm sitting here kind of privately gasping at some of this stuff. To put vinyl siding in the category of high quality, durable building materials is frankly crazy. I mean, just simply crazy. And the fact that we have 2 stone veneers listed on the table of acceptable exterior materials, we do not have natural wood shingles included in this. We have no clear opportunity to allow for certain kinds of contemporary construction that rain screen construction that are becoming more and more important with the trend of the energy code. I mean, it's just we're just stepping into like really crazy territory. I mean, the design examples are, and I'm sorry if I'm hurting anybody's feelings who picked this out, but they're either generic or insipid, and I don't find them that helpful. It's our jurisdiction for the site plan layout to indicate certain relationships in a site plan, certain volumetric relationships, certain proportions and disposition of the building mass on a site. But saying how it looks is just way far beyond what I think we are qualified as a commission to do. I'm further a little bothered by foundation plantings on residential structures. I mean, you're just inviting vermin. You're inviting moisture conditions at a foundation that you really don't want to have. And by requiring that, you're diminishing the overall sustainability and it's the word I want. Serviceability is really the word I wanted of a foundation. Lighting totally within our jurisdiction because that describes how the outdoor environment is going to look. But yeah, I'm just so weirded out by giving design in an architectural direction in zoning that I just feel it does not serve to advance the quality of design. It does not challenge architects to do good architecture. I mean, granted, most of the people who are building this are building depreciable assets. And we're not dealing with architecture. We're just sort of, exterior decorated depreciable asset. But to that extent, even there's got to be somebody who's going to be trying to do something either code compliant, code challenging. That's one of the things that I haven't seen ever in anything that we've seen come before us is what's it called? Sort of a challenge standard in terms of energy savings. Everything we tend to see is, fairly routine, fairly pedestrian, fairly homogeneous. And rather than codify that homogeneity, I think we should just let the architectural community do what they're going to do, or do what they should be trying to do. I'm not sure I'm seeing anything here that's really informing me to what to do.
Dan Robinson here. To kind of explain the motivation for why it was included in the first place, and to Jamie's point, this is not part of the minimum changes, but that, during a special exception application, which would have been the procedure before this law came into effect and people were trying to do multifamily developments, one of the special exception considerations was the design of the building and its how harmonious it was with the surrounding neighborhood. And I think this was kind of in an effort to keep some of that design standards within a summary review process. But again, to Jamie's point, that this is not part of the minimum changes that we need to comply with Public Act 25-1.
I mean, looking at the example buildings, I'm trying to think of where around town I have seen most of these. I mean, some of them are condo forms. The one multiplex down on the left is really a sort of New Haven, Bridgeport building type. And it has a flat roof, and the example roofs are all pitched roofs. So there's a continuity to all of this that is not 100% thought out. And if we want to get into doing that, I think we should put it off and maybe add it later, because I understand the pressure in complying with the statute, and we should probably go for the minimum qualifying data for the statute. And if we want to come up with a set of design standards, that would be, should be a separate formulated task.
Thanks, Joe. Marcy?
I'm going to echo a little bit of what Joe says, and I understand where you're coming from, but I think the word pedestrian is well put. And I think if we're going to require a design standard, we need to hold it to a much higher standard and vague enough that it gives the architects room to be innovative. And because these buildings are housing, more volume, like I think of the old theater building as a prime example as a good infill kind of mixed use project, where you've got the brick structure, you got the solid materials. I'm part of the problem in some of the things I've designed in town, because I have to answer to somebody who just wants to put in a quick vinyl sided kind of structure. And if there was something in the reg that required, say, hardy plank, you'd have a much more durable, longer, a better quality, which I think would attract and preserve the nature of the downtown better, which is where I think this is going to be most impactful, walking to the train station and so forth. And I think it happens, and I'm not just saying just for middle housing, I'm kind of saying for all of our, we're seeing a lot of pressure for these, bigger housing projects, and I would love to see the regs, hold the quality of building materials to a higher standard, and that might create a case where they want more, units to offset the cost of that, or it might encourage them to not have so many units. I'm not sure which, but I do agree with Joe that we need to encourage professionals to do a more professional solution, and have the regulations support that. I had a picayune kind of question about the coverage because in the beginning, because I don't think I was quite following what was happening, but the coverage related in the existing, it says that driveways, whether paved or unpaved, well, unpaved would imply pervious, so why would it have to be counted towards? I guess the coverage is different from impervious. Is that where my confusion is?
So Jamie Frederick, yeah, so that's part of the existing regulation. We did propose to remove the whether paved or unpaved, with one reason being the fact that unpaved could be pervious or at least to some level pervious. And the other reason being MS4 compliance. For MS4, we are supposed to encourage green infrastructure. And so if we treat paved and unpaved the same way, it doesn't really incentivize anything. And I think that revising it this way allows the commission to ask questions about the permeability of a feature and consider it based on the merits of that.
And so the addition of patios and walkways is just because of the residential component to middle housing, or is it for all business districts? Because I just, I think about the IG zone when the coverage, square footage changed and how many parcels became non-conforming as a result of it. And I just don't know if we're creating a similar scenario with that here.
It would apply to all, it would be a part of the general definition, and it would apply to all districts the way that it's written.
So even the IG zones and the other?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to include that as part of the coverage because I just think, and then the other thought I had was when you were talking about buffer setbacks of 15-foot buffers, and if we're, middle housing to me implies, more density solutions, and I don't think you can I don't know that every lot is going to allow for a just straight 15-foot wide buffer. Again, I'd like to see language that would encourage buffers to the greatest extent possible, where it's allowable within the setbacks, where the setbacks can be contained, but I'm not sure that the language for the buffer works here necessarily.
Noted. You're referring to in the landscape design section?
Yeah, it just gave me pause about how applicable that would be. And, I know you had the caveat where it doesn't work, and we had the historical context of, good context sensitive design as a catch-all or excellence in landscape design as a catch-all. But I think, maybe language to just encourage buffers without being so, I know you need to codify things, but without being so specific. And I do think our landscape reg would cover a lot of this, and there's some things that aren't consistent, like you want more evergreens, but you're allowing a lower inch height, but it really depends on what the shrub is that you're selecting, what your starting height should be. And I would imagine that because this is more dense environments that you're going to want to start with much smaller shrubs, so the 18 inches is good, but it doesn't directly correlate with the landscape reg. And I think, when we were doing the landscape reg, that's why we had the different sizes supported for different types of shrubs. And I'm hoping that could just carry over with this, whether it needs to be 60%, not necessarily at the foundation, but 60%. Well, I don't know why it has to be evergreen necessarily. But like again, we're trying to dictate the design where I think if you have a professional doing it, they can adapt it to the site for what is appropriate for the site, just like an architect would adapt the form of the house and the finishes on the house for what's appropriate for the use and flow of the project. That's all I have to say.
In theory, you'd want to have some relationship between the buffer and the height of the house so that you would have continuity of sunlight reach and appropriate shading. But that's awfully hard to come up with, like right off the bat.
Yeah, and I would just question whether our street tree spacing, in the regular landscape reg isn't sufficient for this. Why do we have to requalify it? Because we've put a lot of effort into the landscape, and there's a lot more specificity for natives and so forth. I mean, finding native evergreens is can be challenging. I can tell you that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I believe, sorry, Dan Robinson here. The distance for street trees in 6.3 is 50 feet. And here it's 30 feet. And then, of course, everything that's in section 6.3 is still applicable, and these are just extra requirements.
Right, but the 30, you're not going to plant a red oak, for example, 33 on center because the size of the tree is too big. So now you're specifying smaller trees so that you can plant them at the 30-foot height. And the real denominator is whether there's an overhead line or not. So, the language isn't so much around the spacing, it's more is, if the setback from the street and the overhead wires is such that you can't put a large shade tree at 50-foot spacing, then, medium size or smaller trees can substitute at a closer spacing. And it's more, to me, it should be more dictated by the site than by the zone.
Understood.
So that is Jamie Frederick. I just want to point out one of the things we tried to do, and that those that we worked with tried to do with some of the strap language, is codify those things, because again, this has to be a non-discretionary process. So if it's not in the regulations, it's non-discretionary. You can't hold them accountable to it if there's no standard defined. So I get the points that are being raised, and I think they're valid points, but I also just want to point out that by not having it codified in the regulations in some way, it basically means the commission can't require anything. So I just want to make sure that's identified. And of course, we can put this on any component of the design aspect on hold and come back to it. The design aspect is really just kind of tailoring it for Branford. It's really the applicability, how we're going to process it, site plan requirements, that we really want to try and codify sooner rather than later, since the state statutes are effective.
So, Jamie, do you think the current landscape revised regulation accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish with this specific landscape design regulation in this specific middle housing section? I just feel it's redundant. And, if you feel like, there's a reason to change the spacing of trees because of the nature and form of the zone, couldn't we just add language to make that an option in the overall regulation, that if you don't want to plant a shade tree at 50 feet on center, you could plant a smaller tree at 30 feet on center and give them the flexibility, overall. I don't think that design scenario is specific to the middle housing. I think it's any streetscape or commercial zone or anywhere where there might be overhead wires or there might be a distance consideration to the building, so on and so forth. We obviously want to have street trees and landscaping along the,
So Jamie Frederick, I'll just comment. I didn't draft most of this language regarding the standards. We worked with Tyke and the COG. They kind of came up with some draft language to help get different towns kind of started and on the right path. So we did tweak it a little bit for Branford, but I didn't go in here and create all these standards in a vacuum, or specific to our regulations. The one thing I will say is when the limits of disturbance were removed from the regulation revision. I think it did kind of leave the things open, as far as the planting requirements or specifically side and rear and foundation plantings. So this might help codify some of those requirements. We could also, like you said, look to beef that up in the full landscape section that applies to everything, and probably should, in light of that modification to the regulation revisions that were proposed. I do see that town council has his hand raised.
Bill Enniscoach, Marshallson Town Attorney. I just want to echo something for the commission. I think that as Jamie has pointed out, neither the design standards in D through E, nor the landscape design standards, nor frankly our current impervious surface area definition. Well, the design and landscape standards do not need to be changed in order to comply with the act, and so I want to say legally that's an accurate statement. It's also the case that there's nothing in the Public Act that requires us to change our existing impervious surface area definition. That definition is facially compliant. The issue with that definition is not what it says, but how it's applied. If that definition is applied to a middle housing application in a manner that is perceived to be intended to defeat the non-discretionary aspect of Public Act 25, it is vulnerable to appeal. So I think that the important thing is not what that impervious for purposes of complying with 25.1. It's not what it says; it's how it's applied, because our current definition is facially compliant. Jamie is also absolutely correct that if you could easily delete the landscape design standards and the D through E. Absolutely no problem with that. And you could come back to it. She's absolutely correct, though, that in the absence of any standards, and I think this is why the COG and Tyche work together to try and create a template for standards. With respect to a middle housing application, you open your decisions up to a claim that they violate the non-discretionary nature of a summary review that's required under the Act. I'm not saying that someone would appeal. I'm simply saying that in the absence of objective criteria or standards, you've exposed the commission to the vulnerability of a claim that you're being discretionary. So I think that it behooves us to keep that in mind. I mean, if you're going to delete these because you don't like them, we better come back really quickly and get something on the books, because as these applications come in, you're going to want some objective criteria for us to hang our hat on with respect to appeals, because there will be appeals. And to the extent that we can minimize Branford as being the test case, I think that would behoove us to do.
Lucy, did you have something else? Your answer is.
I just have a question of Bill. So if I hear you correctly, if we create design standards that are very upscale and high quality, is that considered
No,
of the zone?
No, you raise a good question. And I guess I can't answer it other than to say this. If a standard is held to be too burdensome by a court, then we might be in trouble. We won't know that, right, until someone appeals. But we have to have objective criteria that are not capable of being characterized as written to basically defeat the purposes of the statute, right? And it's that's the that's the standard that the courts are going to use. So, do I think we can't have high quality standards? No, but do I think we have to be careful not to make them overly burdensome? Yes. And that I think also answers the question of why we can't simply delete these and then just add the option in the existing, because then that renders the summary review process discretionary, not non-discretionary, right? It makes it just like the existing process, and that's exactly contrary to what the statute's intent is. Keeping in mind that this statute was controversial from start to finish for this very reason.
Is the intent of the statute to provide more affordable housing through the vehicle of middle housing?
Well, I mean, I suppose
Not
you would
calling it
have to.
affordable, but
Yeah.
in essence.
I don't feel comfortable answering that question because I wasn't a lawman. I mean, I can't speak to the purpose of it. One could argue that this is intended to make it easier to create 2 to 9 unit developments that may be incapable of being pursued because of parking restrictions and standards, and and a discretionary process. I think.
Well, I'm just thinking, we see a lot of larger scale apartment type dwellings. We went through a period of condos, and a lot of those rents are really not affordable to many demographics who are just entering young professionals or whatever, and a lot of that is because of an overall shortage of housing, and so when I think of Branford as running out of space for housing, I kind of want to see. I like the concept of middle housing. I've seen cases in New Haven where, LCI I worked on years ago where it was middle size height housing, which I can see where in an urban environment that was something that would be encouraged. So you wouldn't get high rises in that whole sort of, that urban context. But I'm just trying to kind of put it in context and consider how it affects the way the town evolves moving forward. I mean, I do think it responds well to what's happening in our downtown where we don't have a lot of businesses downtown. A lot of people are relying on Amazon or whatever. And we need to make those neighborhoods vibrant, and to have, middle housing is a great solution, which is why I naturally think that the landscape regs with these big buffers is not going to be easy to accommodate, but I would like to see a little, to Joe's Chadwick's point, I don't want to dictate the form and the function, but I think if we can have quality materials and require a certain amount of fenestration that makes, good architectural sense, I'd like to see that for the town. I think that's going to help the economic viability of the town at whatever price point the housing goes to market at.
Makes sense.
Yeah, other members of the commission, I do want to open up to the public. Other members of the commission have any comments before we open up to the public? Sharon?
Yep, Sharon Huntner here. I commend the staff for putting this together. I can see that they really worked hard on this. And I do agree with our attorney that we really do have to have some specific criteria, because there is no public hearing with this new law, and we won't have any kind of say in what these multi-units will look like. And as Mikhail always said, everybody in Branford told him that they all want Branford to stay looking like Branford. And so I think that we really do need to have something in place so that we have sort of a leg to stand on and to say that this is what we want our town to look like. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak before we open up to the public? Hearing none, then let's go to, does any member of the public wish to comment on the application? I don't see anyone. Do you?
I do not see anyone either.
Okay. Okay, so it seems like there's been sort of three issues. One is the definition of impervious surface area. It seems to me that adding the patios and the parking area that would make it encompass more, frankly, impervious surface than is covered by the present definition. And I think Marcy raised the point that when we raised impervious surface, this could render things non-conforming, and it could have possible impacts beyond this middle housing, just about any development, because this is a way of restricting site development, but the impervious surfaces, I think, parking impervious surface. So that's one thing. And then the other main thing was to what extent that we would like to have design criteria for both building and landscaping, I think it seems to be. Do we want to have anything? And you've heard the argument. The argument is we have nothing, then they can just slap together anything and we have no discretion because we lack discretion. It has to be a summary review and there can't be any discretionary criteria. So do we want to have something? So that's the debate, I think. The other stuff, I think it's sort of required by statute, and that's what it is. So those are kind of the issues. I think. What do we want to do with the definition of impervious surface, and then those discretionary criteria about the building materials and particular landscaping? I think were the ones that I think Joe and Marcy were highlighting. So. Do we want to continue this public hearing? There's been no public comment. We can, we should the concern is that if we don't adopt anything, that presumably someone could file an application and the state law would cover it, and we couldn't do, we would just be governed by the state law, and so therefore we would have to approve it. We'd have to be no criteria that we could deny it for those. And but that I guess that's the question. I think the goal is I would like to get a decision on this before we quit, before we take our August recess. So if we don't decide tonight, then we decide at our second meeting in July. So we at least have something in place. And then and I think the issues are, do we want to include the amendment to the impervious surface and then those other discretionary things? So those are my thoughts. We can continue the public hearing, but frankly, I don't think we necessarily need to, because there's been no public comment and we can talk among ourselves anyway. So that is, but I guess it'd be, I suppose the alternates, yeah. Supposedly, if we go to deliberations, just the voting people should do it. So that would be a reason. But otherwise, that's my thoughts. So the immediate question is, do we continue the public hearing or just close the public hearing, think about it, and give direction to staff to what we want to do? So Marcy, you have a hand raise.
Yeah, I would propose, if Jamie agrees, making the landscape, if she doesn't see anything different, maybe other than the spacing, making it consistent with the newly adopted regulation. And then I would propose perhaps not visually showing the building examples, but relying on text. So like when you go to the materials, to say facade treatments without showing the image, I think it leaves at least a little bit more for the architect's imagination. Maybe Joe agrees or doesn't agree, but it starts to show an expectation for quality, rather than the form and how it's actually presented. I mean, Joe helped me on that one, but I'm just trying to find a middle ground to because ultimately I would like to see the standard raised in terms of the quality of materials, and and give the architectural, I understand the need to have it codified, but also to give some space for architects to be challenged as architects.
Joe, what do you think?
I agree using the text, but there are a handful of things I'm just finding here now, reading this in the text, that are kind of odd, like the roof materials don't accept any standard flat roof material like EPDM, TPO, or just any of the customary flat roof materials. And among the other materials they include is ceramic tile, which is frankly stupid. I mean, the closest thing to a ceramic tile that you would see on a roof is a Ludovici tile. And the only place you would see those at this point, probably in a Yale College restoration. I don't think if you're building anything in Branford, you can afford to put a Ludovici tile on a roof, and they're technically not ceramic. So somebody's going to read that, and their eyebrows are going to go up, and they're going to say, "Nobody thought about this." There's some editing that definitely needs to be done in terms of the families of materials. But I agree. Yes, stick to text, get rid of the pictures, and be a lot better off in the long run.
Yeah, Joe, would you just want to delete parts of it rather than add parts?
I would delete at this point. I'd say cutting
Okay.
is going to be the clearest direction.
Okay, because I'm thinking we can close the public hearing, and cut. We just delete
Yeah.
stuff and then do that. But if you were saying, well, I want to add additional substitute, then maybe we keep it open. But
No,
if it's just cutting, okay.
Yeah.
Let's go around. Joe, Fred, thoughts?
I think we should close the public hearing. There's no one here that's going to speak up. I would think that we hear at least one person the first time this went around. We can still have a discussion about it, but I think we should close the public hearing.
Okay, great, thanks. Joe Ayuso?
Yeah, I think we should close the public hearing as well, and then because we only got one more meeting to go. If you want to try to get a vote, we have to do it next time. And if we hold that open, then we don't know what kind of worms we're going to open up here. So I think it was being that, like you said, Chuck, there was no public comment, and we're not adding anything. Joe Chadwick wants to just cut a few things, but not add. So we're very, very much in our right to close the hearing tonight.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Great. Sharon, you okay with that?
Yep.
Sharon,
that's
I don't.
fine.
Yep. Okay. Good. And Dave, you okay with that? Yeah, I take that as a yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, closing the hearing. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, closing the hearing.
Okay, Marcy, you good with that?
Yes.
Yeah, and Joe, you're good with that too, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to close this matter then as a public hearing. Now, what the suggestion is, anyone, I know Joe, between now and the next meeting, if you could suggest your deletions, anyone, it's mainly Joe and Marcy. Marcy, you're focusing more on the landscaping, Joe more on the building, but you covered both. But if you had suggestions of the deletions or tweaks, then send them to staff between now and the next meeting, and hopefully staff can have a draft that we would be ready to vote on, or keep the alternatives. I don't know if we agree with them, but at least something to circulate that would delete some of these things and hopefully get rid of the things, Joe, that you think are not helpful. And
They will have it
we'll
by
see.
Monday.
What? Excuse me?
They will have it
Yeah.
by Monday.
Okay, excellent. Okay, then that's what we'll do. So that matter is, we close that matter as a public hearing. I think we're not going to vote tonight. Give some comments and then consider it at our next meeting. So then that brings us then to item number 5 is a public hearing. I believe that is Jordan Gioia applicant, 16 East Industrial Road, LLC owner, 16 East Industrial Road. This is a special exception for automotive repair, and I understand that this applicant needs a variance so that this matter is not going to go forward as a public hearing. It'll likely be opened as a public hearing on our September 3rd meeting. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yes. The
Yes,
applicant, has requested that we extend the deadline to open the public hearing to September.
Okay. So, and they gave us, I don't know when they filed it. Do we need an extension? But they gave us permission in any event, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And then that's not going forward. If you're on that one, come back September 3rd. So that brings us to item number 6, which is Tyler Hodson, applicant and owner at 42 Orchard Hill Road. This is a special exception for an accessory apartment. Is the applicant ready to proceed on that? Do we have?
I do not see the applicant in attendance. They were aware that the meeting was tonight, and I emailed them a reminder to join the Zoom. They are not here. That being said, I have a fully prepared staff report. If the commission is comfortable, I could go through that, and they could assess if they're willing to take action on it. But I do not see the applicant here right now to present.
Okay. The applicant didn't have any experts. It would just be the layperson himself explaining.
Yes, I was just expecting the property owner to present.
Okay. Dan, why don't you go ahead and present it then?
Okay. All right, so this is a special exception application for an accessory apartment at 42 Orchard Hill Road. They're looking to create a unit completely within the existing envelope of the single family home. They're going to retrofit their basement area. And the applicant, because it's all interior work, there's no outside work proposed whatsoever. They're requesting that the A2 survey requirement be waived. The gross floor area of the principal structure is around 1,733 square feet. Our special exception, or our accessory apartment regulations stipulate that the accessory unit cannot be larger than 30% of the gross floor area of the main home, or larger than 900 square feet, whichever is less. In this case, 30% is less. So the max size they could have for their accessory apartment would be 520 square feet. They have proposed a 511 square feet size, so it would be compliant in regard to that requirements. I'll show you the property here. This is 42 Orchard Hill Road, and this is their sketch of the unit. The blue and red would be the unit. We're looking at the basement level. The red areas are the part of the unit that are underneath 7 feet in height. And per our regulations, areas that are underneath 7 feet in height are not counted towards the gross floor area. So with that in mind, they're at 511 square feet, where it would appear that it is larger. We are in the R3 zone, so the R3 bulk requirements apply. Again, they're not proposing any new structures. This is just the retrofitting of an existing walkout basement. The property is legal conforming, facilitated by a variance in 1982 to allow a side yard setback of 6 feet where 10 feet was required. But again, this does not involve any new structures, so there's no issue there. Parking, the applicable standard before July 1st was that accessory apartments, you needed 1 extra parking space. Today, we can't mandate any new parking, but that being said, there is capacity for 3 parking spaces with the garage and driveway on site. The site is served by public sewer and water, and they would need to secure proper building permits for the additional unit if granted zoning approval tonight, but otherwise the existing conditions are compliant. So an erosion and sediment control, again, not applicable. There are no new structures or exterior work or soil disturbance proposed. This is an aerial image of the property. That patio back there in the backyard, that's the walkout area of the basement. So the basement overlooks this backyard area that slopes down. In regards to our special exception criteria, this proposal adheres to section 11.1 of the 2019 POCD. It calls for carefully managing special exception uses in our residential neighborhoods. Accessory apartments are permitted in the R3 zone through special exception due to their larger minimum lot sizes. This lot is 7,000 square feet larger than the minimum lot size, and the siting of this accessory apartment on the lower level in the back of the house, out of view, it would seem that it would be a harmonious addition to the existing development patterns in the single-family neighborhood. It's largely out of sight, and does not. Again, there's no new buildings. It's completely attached. In regard to the streets, drives, they have to be of size capacity to support this special exception. The public right-of-way, Orchard Hill Road, it's sufficient to support the small number of residents that will be living at this property. The applicant has indicated that this apartment is for his father, who is suffering from a disease. But regardless of who is living in this unit, the max number of residents would not have a negative impact on the traffic patterns for this street or this area of town. We did refer it to our other departments. The town engineer noted that an additional sewer assessment will be due upon the building permit application. That's standard for accessory apartments. It's a new dwelling unit, so that new assessment is due. And there were no comments from the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency, and there were no comments from the town attorney. The commission is tasked with deciding if this special exception, meets the purpose and criteria of section 7.4, which is accessory apartments, and section 9.8, which are special exceptions. To reiterate what I've already said, the lot is of sufficient size to comfortably host an additional small dwelling unit. It is less than 520 square feet, which was the absolute max that this apartment could be. But granted that it's at 511 and it's pretty close, I'm proposing a condition that the commission could place that any future alterations within the unit cannot result in that size being larger than 30% of the principal dwelling unit. The interior nature of this work and its location in the backyard will be sure to limit any adverse impacts to the neighborhood regarding its sightliness, the construction window, and the overall character of the neighborhood. I would argue that it's reasonable to assume that the property will continue to look like a single family home to any passersby, and that adheres to our section 7.4. With all that together, these are my findings and conditions, that the special exception adheres to our special exception requirements in the Branford zoning regulations, and our standard conditions for accessory apartments that it be deeded affordable if it were to be rented, and that any future alterations to the space shall not increase the gross floor area of the accessory apartment to larger than 30% of the principal dwelling's gross floor area, or larger than 900 square feet, whichever is less. That's all I got.
One before we open up to the public. RC.
It's just a general question, not really about this application, but because we're going to be ending up with 2 units, does this then qualify as middle housing? Other than when we adopt the middle housing regulation? How is that going to relate to accessory units versus middle housing when you end up with 2 units?
So Jamie Frederick, middle housing only applies to commercial districts, and this is residential, so it would not.
Yeah, I was speaking to the parking requirements.
Yeah,
which would impact this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments from anyone before we open it up? Hearing none, was any member of the public wish to comment on this item? Any member of the public wish to comment? Do you see anyone? Jamie or Dan? I don't.
I do not.
Okay. Any further comments from staff or commission? Okay, I think we can close this matter as a public hearing then and see what we want to do with it. Okay, then that concludes our public hearing items. So let's see if we can handle the public hearings, any of the public hearings. Let's go back to item number 1, which is 1032, 1064 Main Street. This is a special exception for the change of use for limited retail. And maybe you can pull up the staff report, Dan, that you did for that one. This one seemed to be, again, there was no public comment. It's the same store. They have, that's 3 units down, and they just want to expand. It seems to be appropriate for the area. Anyone have any comments? And if not, someone want to make a motion with respect to the findings and approval and with the condition that Dan has set forth in his findings and conditions in his staff report presented before us.
Chadwick will make that motion.
Motion to approve by Joe Chadwick with the findings and the condition. Is there a second?
Fred Russo seconds it.
Second by Fred. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo's in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair is also in favor, so that application is approved. Item number 2, I think this is one we're going to discuss a little bit, but we're not going to vote on tonight. That's the hospital at 596, 612, 616 East Main Street. I think most of there were a few details that I think the main issue I think we need to discuss is sidewalks. Sounds like the conservation easement, they worked out something with the land trust. They're going to allow the Branford Trail, which is a great resource, to continue in the town. It has some liability. You know, I understand the property owners, but they've worked that out. So the other issue, and there were some details about lighting that Jamie can look at, but the issue is the sidewalk. And I'll give you my general thoughts, and we'll just go around with our thoughts. I know on some of these sidewalk issues, there's a sense that, you know, an implicit sense that we're doing, you know, are we requiring too much of applicants, you know, particularly if the applicant is like a tenant fit up or something like that and requiring major infrastructure. In my mind, this is the type of application where we want everything done right, that we want, that you don't want to squeeze. We have a national applicant, we have a big site, we have a big project that's coming in. You want this site to look good. It's great for the town. So you don't skimp on the necessary things. So my opinion that this is it is a sidewalk priority area according to our plan of conservation development. There's 3, it comes within one of them. We did it for the property that's even further away from the town center, the next door one. They've got a sidewalk, but there are site constraints here, and I understand that. My preference would be to put as much of a sidewalk as you can and on the site or now, because I think there's a lot of frontage there, and it's not all bad topography, and then to get an easement or some other details for the areas where you can't do it, either because of topography or because of the wetlands. But I don't think because there's a wetlands on portion of it that okay, you shouldn't build it at all. I think you should. I mean, the neighboring things have done it. And I think when I looked at, you know, their applicant, their traffic engineer or their engineer said, yeah, there's a bus stop right across the street down by the Y. That makes sense. And they could go to this one and they would cross the street and there's sidewalks on the Y and you just go to the property. So why don't we continue that as much as we can? And let those details with staff and, you know, work out some suggestions on that. Sounds like they're willing to grant an easement for everything, but I think I would like to get a little more than that. And if they need more time or whatever, I don't have a problem. So, you know, particularly for the problematic areas. The other stuff, I don't see why you can't do it. So anyway, those are me, and I took the liberty of starting first, but let's go around. Joe Chadwick, what do you think?
I mean, this is an incredibly important project, and I really don't want to see it get sort of bound up in minor things. But I think the discussion of the sidewalk is worth a little bit of consideration. I agree that the sidewalk may be somewhat burdensome and maybe perhaps a little illogical at this point, even though we always speak out of two sides of our face. We want a sidewalk, but then when the actual push comes to shove, we're willing to back off on the sidewalk. In this case, I think at a very minimum, we should require a bus stop across the street and on the site in both directions. Anybody who has tried to walk anywhere in this town is like taking their life in their hands when you're come near Route 1, to say nothing of what it's like in the wintertime. And the fact that you may have somebody working there, somebody coming to visit, they're not going to get off at the Y and walk down here in the middle of winter. I mean, the reality of it is just life-threatening. I mean, I found the comment about they'll probably, if you're working there for 12 hours, you'll probably have a car anyway. I thought that was just incredibly dismissive and elitist, because the kind of people who take those jobs are the kind of people who ride the bus. So I think a bus stop is at a minimum what we should be requiring on site and across the street. And it's like, oh, there's a bus stop.
We don't regulate that, and the applicant doesn't regulate that. Those are great points, and we could request DOT to make a bus stop there. But I think that is not
the bus company.
But that's nothing we can put as a condition of approval or anything.
No, but I think we need to have evidence of a really concerted effort to have a bus stop at that location. Because it's like, well, you have a bus stop close by. That's what buses do. They stop. If you're in town, buses stop every corner, sometimes in the middle of the block. So I don't think that's such a big ask.
Okay, what about the sidewalks themselves? What about the sidewalks? Or should they get an easement? Should they install them? Should they, as much as they can? I mean, I get my opinion, but I don't know what you.
Yeah, if at the very minimum, at least a sidewalk to the bus stop.
Okay, okay. I mean, my opinion is, as much of the frontage you have a sidewalk. That's what you put it everywhere you can, except otherwise. But I don't know where the bus stop is, and that could vary. So, but yeah, I'm saying that because it's in our plan. It's in a PLCD.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we required it for others. I know John Nutt said, "Oh, I never heard that." He did it. He's a hypocrite. John did it when we were pushing the Regal redevelopment. He said, "Well, you didn't require it when we did the other side because you only required 8 units." And yeah, no one ever does it. Well, you did, John. So anyway, I am concerned about that. I think that is. I don't think I get the constraints, topography, wetlands constraints. That's a distinction. But otherwise, I think we should require it. Anyway.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there is a boardwalk on Tabor Road. That is not, it's there, it's passable in the winter, and it's well protected from traffic.
Thanks. Fred, what do you think?
Well, I think if we couldn't, this is for the sidewalks, if whatever the reasons are, okay, we're going to have a discussion about that some other time, not at this very moment, but it would kind of look silly having sidewalks and then stopping, then another sidewalk somewhere else. You talk about, the greatest danger is someone crossing the street, not whether they're going to be walking on a sidewalk. If they can make it across the street, that's the greatest danger, not whether there's a sidewalk or not. So, if the sidewalks should go in, I would just say, one, this company seems like they're willing to make some concessions with the trail and stuff like that. I don't think it's a big gift to them to say to them, hey, we'll give you an easement and you got X number of years to put it in, but let them get their building in, let them get themselves operated, and that also gives the company a little more time to look into that business. Even though you can't force them to do it, but to look into a bus stop, because I think Joe is absolutely right. Generally, the people that work on those healthcare services are not going to be driving in with a Cadillac. It's the bottom line. They will be taking buses, and it makes more sense now. Whether it's done unofficially, that's another story. But I think without the demand that these sidewalks must go in, and then when you demand that they go in by mandated they go in, they're not even going to go in all the way. They're going to be some here, some there. Someone drives by, they're going to say, "Who thought about this idea?" So if they're going to go in, that's not my objection. My objection is either they should all go in, or they should at least be deferred to a point where other details can be worked out. One being that bus stop, and that's a good idea. It's a safety factor, but it's almost like tempting someone stop at the bus stop, run across Route 1. If you can make it across there, at least you got the sidewalk to walk on. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that if we're going to provide that safety factor, it's got to be one all the way, and not just pieces wherever the law does. And who's going to explain that to people? People are going to look at it and say, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So I'm not against sidewalks. I think the way it was explained, it's not like we're saying we don't want them. We're just saying, hey, let's put an easement on this thing. Let's work out those details. I think we have a staff that can do that, and it will get done. I think, anybody that's come before this commission, I think they know that we're very reasonable. Okay, and I think our staff is very reasonable, and I think that if they want to come before this commission again and try to pull the wool over our eyes, it's only really happen once. They're not going to get away with it twice. So my personal feeling would be, unofficially have the applicant pursue a bus stop. 2, to have an easement on the sidewalks until an actual plan can be made so that it's completely done, and that when someone drives by, there's not some sidewalks and there's some places where there's no sidewalk. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Joe Vayuzo, thoughts?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on the sidewalk situation. Basically speaking, as far as I can see on the plan, where the curb cut is now that's going to the store, that curb cut is going to also be existing with this new building that's going up. And where that curb cut going east, that's where the problem is with the wetlands. And at least for the facility and for the employees and the area where most of the people are going to be are between that curb cut and going west to the new curb cut that's going to be installed. And between the two curb cuts, basically speaking, that's the easiest place and the most the topographical area there is good, easy to put a sidewalk there, and so that's where all the activity is going to be, and I would assume that the bus stop that we're talking about, bus stops east and west. That's where it would stop as well. So that's the activity area there, and that's where I think where a sidewalk could be put in relatively easy. Anything beyond that, west-wise, is going to be a little tough. But at the very least, I think we should at least compromise for now and work out the rest to get a sidewalk to the end of their property. But at least let's try to get a sidewalk installed, at least between those two curb cuts, where all the activity is going to be. And I agree that bus surface has to be a consideration, because maybe you don't know too much now, but when this facility opens, there is going to be a reasonable amount of, I would assume, there's going to be a reasonable amount of people using the bus service to get there. And if that activity is used well enough, I think we can get the DOT to recognize that and have a bus stop, a legitimate bus stop be added to their list. So I think at the very least, a sidewalk needs to be installed as soon as possible between those two curb cuts. And then east of that and west of that, which are the problem areas, will have to be worked out down the road. But at least let's get where the most activity is and the easiest spot to install the sidewalk, get that at least in an agreement to be done. At the same time, this building, this facility is being constructed. Other than that, that's all I have for comment.
Thanks, Joe. Bill and Jamie, what about that? I mean, do you have thoughts about partial sidewalk and getting easements or something for the rest, or something delayed time? Do you guys have any thoughts? Just kind of following on Joe's comment. Yeah.
Jamie, you want to go first?
Sure, Jamie Frederick. So, I do think that there's precedence for conditions for sidewalks being installed, added to the site plan prior to issuance of the building permit, prior to certificate of zoning compliance. I did take some notes on some of the comments that commissioners have made, so we can consider that in drafting some language. I think, as the chairman pointed out, we don't have jurisdiction over bus stops. I do think that it is relevant to the consideration of the sidewalk conversation, but we can't require a new bus stop location. I do think that the deferred installation of the sidewalks, in my interpretation of the regulation, is a little bit easier to see than providing for an easement with no mechanism for the sidewalk to be installed beyond providing permission for the town to do it. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Bill?
Thanks. I think that an easement together with a deferred implementation plan would be the best option to accommodate all of the various opinions that have just been articulated. We have heard everything from do the whole thing to put a sidewalk in between the two curb cuts to put the sidewalk in wherever you can without impacting the wetlands. And I would caution folks about speculating about who works or doesn't work for a company. I would respect the company enough to know or to think that they know who their employees are. I think we can, as a town, request a bus stop. We needn't put that inappropriately on an applicant, because, as the chairman points out, we can't condition this for that. But there's nothing that prevents the town from making that request, and I think that that's something that I can take back as well. But I think that if you allow us to work on a condition that couples a deferred implementation plan with an easement, to the extent that the resolution might end up being a joint venture between the town and this applicant, or some other opportunity that presents itself. So I think that it's important, given the constraints of the site that have been amply demonstrated, that the key is both the easement to the extent that becomes necessary, and a deferred implementation plan that gives us time to work out. And I agree, by the way, with the other comments about ways to install a sidewalk in an environmentally sensitive way that have been done in our town, not just in Milford, but in Branford. But those are going to take time to work out, and therefore I think that the two parts, I think we can craft a condition for you that will satisfy everyone, including the applicant, and get us in the end what we're looking for along that property. That would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Bill. Marcy, I didn't mean to cut you. I jumped to the staff.
I had a couple of thoughts. I think they're consistent with what Bill's saying. And so, Joe Vayuso, that was exactly my opinion. The only when I think about a sidewalk, I think of like Damascus Road, where people are going for walks to get to a place, and they're willing to walk a mile to get to the town center. I don't see that happening on this street. I see this as I'm getting to a destination via a bus. And if I have to cross the street in a safe manner, you know, people aren't, I mean, are people walking from here to the YMCA or from here to the vacant chowder pot? I don't see that. I think, there's a potential for some long, project across the street in some, you know, unknown future that if to me that's just as logical a place and perhaps a better place to implement the sidewalk in many cases. But, you know, unless there's a relationship between, the people getting on buses across the street and wanting to get from whatever's going to happen across the street to this project and vice versa, I don't see this as a major, walkway kind of system. Someone made the comment we need sidewalks for bikes. People don't ride bikes on sidewalks. You need a wide shoulder for bikes. And that just lends to the fact that it's a state road, it's a highly trafficked road. We want to maintain sight lines and have, if they have to cross the street to the bus, have clear sight lines for that. But to me, it's not sidewalks because you're walking to like a downtown residential place necessarily. I don't know who's going to be walking on these walks. So to require somebody to put a boardwalk in over a wetland and to delay a project for more wetland approvals, it just seems like a stalling tactic more than anything else to require the sidewalk. So I'm more than happy to have an easement or, on the east and west end, have maybe a temporary walk that, could create a walkway or a place to have a bus stop or wait for a bus, even if it's not a legal bus stop, for that potential. But I just don't see a continuous connected sidewalk as being a high priority necessarily in this area. I see it as what walks do we need to connect bus stops? And if that's best accomplished, from a deferred plan or an easement, I'm happy with that too.
So thanks. I think, Bill, if you can, perhaps I'm thinking far ranging too, because what if somebody wants to walk over to the Y during their lunch break or something? Who knows? In any event, I like sidewalks. It's in our plan and so forth. But anyway, I understand everything. Bill, can you work and staff work on some contingencies and see? Let's see what they come up with. I think you've got a sense of the various opinions of people, so we can just go from there. So anyway, I just wanted to give staff some guidance to come up with something, and we'll hopefully we will be in a position to vote on something at the next meeting. So
Chuck,
that's. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just from the perspective of staff as well, because they're working on a lot of things. Would you like staff to draft a resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
we want a favorable resolution in favor with the conditions that cover everything. Jamie, you said they submitted a lighting plan that just came in, so you get a chance to double check that. I mean, there were a few other things that we just want to make sure that we, get it all ready. So yeah, a motion or a resolution in favor of the findings and conditions in favor, and all the conditions that we would normally put and look it over, because it's an important project. So
thank you.
Okay, so then I think that was that one. On the regulation amendment, we're going to defer. Anyone who has comments on that are going to send those to Jamie. And again, the idea is delete, not add. And think about further. The impervious surface is kind of interesting because I'm concerned about the possible. And I think Marcy, you raised a good point. What if we add? Even though technically I agree, it probably should be. You should include patios as impervious but that said, I think that could have a major. Could have a major impact, because we're close. So anyway, take a look at that. That's something we can decide at the next meeting, and then the deletion stuff that we go in. So that's what we're doing on that one. And then let's pull up our accessory apartment one. We had the public hearing on that. It seemed fairly, even though the applicant wasn't here. Dan, can you pull up the first thing? I think they requested a waiver of the A2 survey, and I think your recommendation was it's all interior anyway. They don't really need a survey. So So I think that we would need a separate motion to vote on that. And then here's the proposed finding and conditions. It seems like they're compliant with the regulations. You know, we get the affordable unit out of it, and so why not? Anyone have any other thoughts? Even though they weren't here, there was no public comment, no opposition. So let's try this. Is there a motion to waive the A2 requirement for this special exception application for an accessory apartment on 42 Orchard Hill Road? I want to make that motion.
Chadwick makes that motion.
Motion by Joe Chadwick. Is there a second?
Fred Russo will second it.
Give it to Fred. Any further discussion? All those in favor of waiving the A2, say aye. Joe Chadwick.
Joe Chadwick in favor.
Fred Russo.
In favor.
Joe Vayuso.
Joe in favor.
And Marcy.
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. Okay, so now, yeah, if no one has any comments, someone make a motion to approve the application by adopting the special exception findings and conditions that Dan reviewed in his staff report with us and is currently presented on the screen before us.
Fred Russo will make that motion.
Motion approved by Fred. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second, Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick in favor.
Fred Russo.
In favor.
Joe Vayuso.
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy.
In favor.
And Chair also is in favor. So that application is approved. Okay, old business. There's an item 37 Lamphere Cove Camp Road. This is a coastal site plan. I understand that we're waiting for additional information on that one. Is that correct, Jamie and Dan? Okay.
They still need their condo letter.
Okay, so that one's incomplete, so we can't act on that one now. For new business, looks like there's a special exception for an accessory apartment. I understand we're going to hear that at our next meeting on July 23rd. Is that right, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, that brings in the minutes. I think the June 23rd special meeting minutes were sent out. I think they're by email. I don't know if we have hard copies, but does someone want to make a motion with respect to those? I guess, and I know that Marcy and Fred were not at that meeting, but Dave and Sharon were.
Joe Vayuso moves to approve the minutes.
The minutes, Joe Vayuso, is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second by Joe Chadwick. All those in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick in favor.
Joe Vayuso.
Joe Vayuso in favor.
And I'm going to ask the people, there, Dave Dyer, are you in favor of
I'm in favor.
those minutes?
Yep, I'm in favor.
Okay, and Sharon.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And so is the chair. So those minutes are approved. Any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay. Then we have other business. Item number 1, informal discussion, 569, 573 East Main Street, creation of a PDD containing a wholesale club, gas station, and sit-down restaurant, 2 quick-serve restaurants with a drive-through, and a strip commercial building with a drive-through end cap. Okay, this is for an informal discussion for PDD. Our regulations allow that. I think they make it clear that, again, nothing we say here, this is just, we're not making up our mind on anything here. We haven't had a public hearing on anything. No one can say anything that you say or say here can't be used against you. But you said during the preliminary, that doesn't count. And I think the applicant should be aware of that on these things. So is the applicant ready to proceed with this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm attorney Marjorie Shansky, and I represent Sound Development Group, LLC. And I'm here this evening with Mr. Phil DeGennaro, a principal, and Michael Belfanti, also a principal. And I'm also here tonight with Mr. Jeff Black, a site development manager with BJ's Wholesale Club. I'm here with Jason Carr from Stantec and with Luke Morrow and Kevin Soley from Soley Engineering. We're here to talk about 569 and 573 East Main Street, 37.7 acres on Leeds Island Road, East Main Street, and East Industrial Road. I think it would be, because you are at the end of a very long meeting, I'm going to toss this over to Luke and Kevin to share with the commission our planning exercise and where we are in the moment. We did meet earlier in the spring with staff, and as the chair said, because of the ability under your regulations to have this sort of pre-application session, we wanted to elicit any questions or comments that the commission may have as we complete our planning exercise and get ready to petition for the master plan. So Luke or Kevin?
Thank you, Marjorie. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer with Soley Engineering in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering, offices located at 501 Main Street in Monroe, Connecticut. I also hold the designation as a professional traffic operations engineer. We're here tonight to talk about 569 and 573 East Main Street. As Marjorie mentioned, we've had some great discussions with staff. Obviously, we're very familiar with the history of this site and some of the previous, considerations that have been made for the property. And when we took this assignment on, we wanted to be very sensitive to that. We wanted to look at, what was previously contemplated here, how those proposals were received, some of the comments and concerns regarding those proposals, and we wanted to be very sensitive to that. So, we were excited to be here with you tonight, to be a part of this project, because we do think it could be a very great addition to the town of Branford. I'm going to throw it over to Luke. He's going to run you through some of the site plan components, and then I'll finish up with just a brief discussion on preliminary traffic analysis and some some improvements we can make throughout the area. And then we're really here to kind of solicit feedback, get your thoughts, and because we believe that engaging with you guys at this stage is only going to help make our application better, and that's our primary goal.
Great, thanks, Kev. For the record, my name is Luke Morrow, professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, also professional traffic operations engineer with Soley Engineering office in Monroe, Connecticut. So I won't harp on existing conditions too much because I'm pretty sure everybody knows where we're talking about, but just so it's clear, project, as Marjorie said, is 38 acres, give or take, known as 569 and 573 East Main Street, bound on the north side by East Main Street, on the west side by Leeds Island Road, and then the Stop and Shop Plaza in the southwest corner, bound on the south by East Industrial Road and some industrial uses, and then on the east side by a bunch of industrial uses that are along East Industrial and Sycamore Way. And then we'll move forward into our rendered site plan here for high level. So as Marjorie had indicated, the project here is going to be anchored by a BJ's, about 105,000 square foot BJ's wholesale club on the east side of the development with an associated gas station kind of set along East Industrial Road on the south side of the development. In addition, some kind of ancillary or support development, if you will, towards the west side, around the 7,600 square foot sit-down restaurant, a pair of drive-through restaurant users of about 2,800 square feet each, and then also a strip retail building of about 16,000 square feet would consist of a variety of commercial restaurant tenants and likely another drive-through end cap. What you see on the screen, the total number of parking spaces is about 760 total parking spaces. In terms of access, right now we're proposing likely a signalized intersection, full movement, kind of split between the BJ's and the restaurant user. We think that'll be like the major traffic entrance and exit for the development here. hence why we're showing a signal there. And then a secondary entrance more for the strip retail and the pad developments on the west side. Full movement, likely unsignalized signal over here on East Main Street on the west side of development. Also, a secondary full movement unsignalized driveway on Leeds Island Road to the rear of the facility, more so to kind of help encourage truck flow through the area. And then also on East Industrial Road, an entrance could be a signalized entrance. We're evaluating the potential for that, along where the BJ's gas station would be, and then also a right-in entrance as well for ease of access to the pumps in that area over there. Just high level, in our planning stages, we did incorporate refuse areas for each of the specific development pads, loading areas as well for all the development pads so that trucks can pull off out of the way. Garbage is kind of off to the side, can be screened for visual purposes as well. We haven't gotten into a fully baked stormwater design, but we do anticipate that a majority of the stormwater management will be accomplished through a variety of above ground detention ponds. You can kind of see these lighter green areas we've kind of pinned as good spots for above ground detention, and likely some smaller underground detention basins as well to kind of compensate. Without getting into too much detail, all the stormwater management will be designed in accordance with town standards, and then the Connecticut DOT Drainage Manual and the Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual, with the goal of reducing peak runoff rates for all storm events. This high-level site will be serviced by all public utilities, natural gas, telephone, water, sewer, and electric. We do have an application in. We've talked with Jen Aquino, town engineer, and she did encourage us to submit, I believe it's an informal application for like a preliminary approval of our sewer estimates. So we did submit that application last week, and we will be on an agenda to present that and get feedback from WPCA at their August meeting, because they're not meeting in July. We've also started some of those initial conversations with the other utility companies as well. In terms of landscaping, we know there's our new set of landscaping requirements for the town of Branford. So in our opinion, we have a fairly robust landscaping plan, as you can see here. A lot of street trees for screening and for decorations as well. A lot of islands within the parking lot with trees as required to meet the landscape regulations in the code. Buffering along neighboring properties, Stop and Shop over here, and the industrial users to the south of us. So buffer plantings, and then the goal with all our landscaping designs is typically like an 80% native tree shrub species that are also drought resistant, and of course no invasive species. Our emphasis is also going to be made with the above ground ponds to kind of create stormwater type wetlands, if you will, by instituting wetland specific seed mixes and stuff that can grow and thrive in those wet type of conditions. With that, just a couple comparison numbers before I kick it back to Kevin. Everyone's probably familiar with the former Costco PDD that was proposed on the property. Was slightly larger in terms of area. It did include a corner over here of about 4 acres that is excluded from our development plan. So we're about 10% smaller in land area than that one was. But in terms of the development square footage, we're only a little more than half the total development square footage of what was proposed as that PDD. That had around 240,000 square feet. We're at about 135,000 square feet, so a little more than half of what was proposed. And in terms of the parking space count, just to get an order of magnitude, we're at about 70% of the number of parking spaces, around 760 compared to about 1,100 that they had. So with that, Kevin, I'll kick it back over to you to wrap it up with some traffic thoughts. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Luke. Again, so as part of our preliminary analysis, we have obviously looked at traffic operating conditions throughout the area. We wanted to make sure that we understood the concerns with raised as part of the last time, or any time development happens in this corridor. We are proposing, as Luke mentioned, a proposed signal at our primary driveway for BJ's there. We're anticipating unsignalized accesses primarily for the most part everywhere else, but we will do some spot widening to ensure that we have adequate turn lanes and can manage the traffic flow through the corridor. Ultimately, our initial analysis shows that we can, maintain acceptable levels of service everywhere throughout the corridor. Nothing, no degradation from existing or background conditions. And I think one of the biggest components is when you really look at it for the key peak periods that are analyzed for development like this, those PM afternoon peaks and those Saturday midday peaks, we're less than 70% of the traffic that was anticipated to be generated from some of the from previous application here. So we were familiar with what that discussion was. We understand how that was received, and we wanted to make sure that we were making a very mindful approach to this. Be responsive to what a lot of the discussions were, and we believe that this plan will achieve a lot of those goals. So at this point, I think we'd be happy to take any kind of initial feedback, because again, I think any feedback will just help us make a better application, a better presentation for you guys in the future.
Thank you. Let's go around. I'm gonna go reverse order. Okay, Marcy, I'm gonna make you go first. I know that because I always pick on Joe first, but
I have no problems going first. I have a lot of opinions.
Okay, great.
If you could zoom out slightly so you could see East Industrial Drive, that would help me. Okay, we don't have to go crazy, but so I appreciate that that the overall density is less than the Costco plan. I think that was very prudent of you. I appreciate that the system to the east, that you've protected that whole natural corridor. There's a lot of wetlands in there, so I think that's a nice ecological move. I think one of the strengths of the Costco plan that I think is starting to get forgotten about was the connectivity from the southbound off ramp onto East Industrial Drive and the ease of the approach into the building. While you have it, you've got that sharp right turn. I'm not sure what that is on the end of the gas station. It's not a very fluid road. I know there's a drainage system through there. I know that there's grade change through there, but in a perfect two-dimensional world, I would love to see either side of that gas station have a through road that is more developed as a full road and connected to where the light is, because I think there's a lot of pressure along Leeds Island Road for traffic, and any way that we can avoid adding traffic onto Leeds Island Road is going to be appreciated and a gain from this project. I think that was, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities that I wouldn't want to see lost by having a site that connects onto East Industrial Road and to Route 1. I'm very concerned about the two traffic light area on the northwestern corner in here. I feel like I know the traffic coming down East Main Street can get backed up during rush hour quite a bit, and it's going to put that pressure on the traffic control, and I think activity is going to be coming through the site rather than turn in that way to use those facilities. And so I'd like to see that cross connection a little better defined than having to maybe perhaps go through the parking lots. You've started to create a connection behind the restaurant with that through road. I think that is another stronger connection that maybe you could tee into from East Industrial, or just to make the flow of traffic and the options from different parts of the development available for the uses. I, I don't have issue with, the fast food. I think, you know, I think my focus is really I want to see it as a more internally designed project, or like a internally campus design that's, I understand that retailers want the visibility from the road, but I think because there's so much land area to connect those, if you could zoom back out again, connect those other pad sites in a way that makes it feel a little bit more like a integrated campus and less like a standard strip mall type area. I do like the the spaces that you're leaving, and I'm sure a lot of that is because of the grading. I know there's quite a bit of grade change between the area of where the BJ's is and that lower area, but I think you could, work the roads and the distance in such a way to minimize crossings and minimize pavement to have a more internally sophisticated kind of plaza, that like things that I've seen like up in Massachusetts and things like that. But I think you're off to a good start, and I think if it's done right, it could be a very nice addition for the town.
Thanks, Marcy. Joe Viuzzo?
I don't know what to say. You caught me blindsided over here. I didn't even know this thing was coming up. I sort of knew, but I didn't know it was something this large. It's including that property that's right across the street from what we were just talking about as well. That farm that used to be a cornfield for a while, so that's including that property as well. So it starts from Leeds Island Road going all the way across to that. I got my concerns about developing something this large in this part of town. And what's the? I know we have no control over this, and they have no control. We nobody does about what's going to happen beyond that, going more east on Route 1. What's it going to open up? What other properties are going to be opening up from here to Guilford, from there to Guilford? And I'm concerned about what the Costco that was opened up in Old Lyme. Look what they're doing over there, the construction that's going on over there. A lot of that construction from the state and I-95 and all that has to do with the activity and all the added activity that is taking place there because the Costco is there. And are we going to have a similar situation to this area? Across the street, we're always talking about traffic and lighting and density and all that, and I don't know. I'm just going to hold my comments a little bit more. I got to digest it a little more, so I'm a little uneasy about it right now. I'm just thinking out loud right now, so I don't have really any more thoughts about it than that right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Fred?
I would say that conceptually, I like the idea of having a store like this in our town. I know we had at one time an opportunity for a Costco, and that did not happen. This is a smaller facility than the one that Costco was suggesting. But I think if something like this is going to happen, this is probably the right part of town for it to do it. It's in kind of an industrial area. It's not in a residential area. It's not going to affect anybody in that respect. There are fast food places. There's a Popeyes across the street. There's a huge gas station. There's a truck stop. So there's a lot of stop and shop. So, it kind of fits the mold of the property. I don't know what the final plan is going to be. I'm sure that'll be worked out over the months. This is to proceed. But I think just, as I said, conceptually, I like the idea that having a BJ or a Costco or whatever the big box store is in our area. I know a lot of people go out of their way to drive to. I think it's in Milford. Maybe they now go to Old Line, but I know the people I know for a fact go to Milford to go to Costco. I think having a BJ's in our town and in this particular area, if it's somewhere else, I might feel differently about it. But it seems like if something's going to go there, it's not going to be a boutique type shop. It's just not the area for it. That kind of business we want to encourage in our center of town. But out in the outskirts, especially being off of an exit, it seems like it might be a good place for it. Like I said, I don't know all the details, and I feel like Joe. I'll wait and see what else is proposed and what's going to happen. But I think, initially, I think it could be a good fit for the property.
Thanks, Fred. Joe Chadwick?
Well, I think the warehouse store is pretty well situated. Without marketing information, I really have my doubts about the restaurant and the other retail, how sustainable they're going to be and how long-lived they're going to be, especially for the amount of area they take up. And but again, this is quite new, and I'm not in a position to really have an opinion on the layout yet, just having seen it. But it's based on Marcy's reaction. Yeah, okay, I go along with that.
Thanks, Joe. Sharon, any thoughts?
Oh, yeah. This is going to have a tremendous environmental impact to the town. I mean, I agree with Fred and Joe and Marcy that this is the area of town that should have this kind of development. I also echo Joe's Vayuso's concern about the density, but what I'm feeling most important about is you are going to be cutting down all the trees on this property, even though I see that you're leaving some areas of green that filter out the pollution that comes from 95. And so that is going to change the air quality in that part of town. And I see that your landscaping plan is intact, but what I would encourage you to do is think more environmentally. So to balance all that out, instead of using a fossil fuel like gas for your energy, think about solar. You have this beautiful flat roof on your building. It's a perfect place for a solar array, and using heat pumps instead of gas furnaces. And in your parking lots, solar canopies would be another interesting structure, which would protect the cars from the snow and ice during the winter. So that would be a double purpose. And while you're doing construction, the only energy efficiencies that is currently being supported by our government is geothermal. And so if you could think about maybe somehow incorporating geothermal in your buildings and access some of those incentives and be more environmentally sound, I would suggest looking into that. The other thing is that there's a new law in Connecticut that says any building that has, and let me get my facts here, more than 30 parking spaces has to have 10% of those spaces wired for electric vehicle charging stations at the level 2 level. So that needs to be incorporated into your plan as well. So I would just, as I said, I agree with the rest of the commission that this is the area for commercial development, but I really would encourage you to balance all the destruction of all the trees that you're going to be taking down in that area and think about all these other alternative energy sources. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Dave, any thoughts?
I'm with I'm with Fred. I think it's a great, great thing. Industrial area, having, another place to stop in, either eat or shop or something like that. We have a ways to go before, approvals are made and stuff like that. But I tend to agree with Fred on this situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. In terms of my thoughts, again, you see this and you're automatically, at least I am, thinking, okay, how did Costco look on that site? That's what we're used. And that was that was a little over 10 years ago, I think. That was probably 11 years ago. But there was, it was a controversial application. It was approved 3-2, so it was close. And I think Marcy raised some interesting points about the access, because my recollection of that, it was that they projected a lot of their traffic coming from the east, Guilford, Madison, or whatever, and they would come off the exit ramp and go straight into the site. That and to me that was significant because traffic's an issue, and anytime you got major retail, these are the major traffic generators, and that was one thing they did to address it. And I think they added an extra traffic lane on the eastbound traffic as well, exit 56 coming from New Haven, that they actually added an extra traffic lane as well. I know those are sort of STC type of issues. I don't even know what it's called now, the State Traffic Commission or whatever it's called. But those yeah, OSTA issues but my recollection is that was one of the things that kind of got me thinking, okay, they've addressed where their traffic's coming from. It goes right there. And this one looks like it says your main entrance is on East Main Street. So and that's more of an afterthought, the down thought, which to me raises more traffic issues than the other one. Because if that's where you're going to put lights, because I don't think they had a light. I don't recall them having a light on there. I think it's they were able to do all that. So I have raised concerns about the traffic and about the access issue. So that was one thing. The use issue, because we heard so much, last time about that they just don't want retail, mainly because it's traffic generating type of stuff. I think that was it. So, you've heard, different things here. Where else in town should we do it? Should we have it? Shouldn't it be here? Where else would it be? That's a fair point. But I suspect, and you're going to hear a lot of what I remember the term being used is, no, we want biotech. There was other things that's better for our use, and that takes longer to develop. So you shouldn't sell out to retail. I think it's a different environment. But anyway, I expect we would, because we had a big public hearing on this, and that you would need to address that we're going to hear that if you come before us. And I'd be curious what they say, and could they persuade me? Could you persuade me? Anyway, the use issue is, retail in this site, is going to come up, and would like to hear what you have to say on that. We were, environmental issues. I know the Costco site, eventually the wetlands application was withdrawn. I don't know how close you are to wetlands, but obviously, is that a site constraint? Is the land trust going to oppose this? Is this, is there, because I know that, again, we're not the Wetlands Commission. You got a separate Wetlands Commission, but are there, what are the distinctions there that kind of came up a little bit here, even though it's mainly another commission? And then I'll throw it out because, it just came up earlier, sidewalks. This all the more reason to have sidewalks. Now the people from the rehab center can go get lunch and go to BJ's, and they're going to cross the street and want some sidewalks and bus stops and everything like that. So yeah, I would like to see sidewalks on Route 1, and I don't know what other internal stuff. So those were kind of my general thoughts. Marcy, you have your hand raised. You have something additional you want to comment on?
Yes, I know Sharon's worried about trees, and I can appreciate that, but I just want to remind her, in case she's not thinking, that the whole area where that proposed BJ's is basically farmland. So there are no trees there now. So I would I would be curious how many trees they're adding in
Oh, okay.
to that area
Area.
as a result of, and what that calculation is. Because you can see how much clearance there is. I mean, I remember the Costco, I know the site very intimately, and I remember the Costco application, and, and I've always contended, even with the Costco, I realize that it's, the public wants biotech and wants, some other use, but, the state went in their infinite judgment, you know, plowed through when they built 95, drained all that water to create the Red Hill, complex. That all came from the creation of 95. It wasn't a native wetland. It's wetland that grew as a result of the impact of the Army Corps of Engineers work, or I should say the DOT's work to create that highway. But we've got 5 exit points. The state at some point decided that this was going to be a major node for traffic to stop at. So, I realize that we want to resist development. I realize that we've got it all as an IG zone, but I think what I've seen over the years is rather than having developments front the corridor, if anything we can do to, like our POCD says, to create a node here by having a through road coming from across to where that light is. I think the light is a great idea across from, the potential hospital location. I think that just justifies a future bus stop there for both purposes. The sight lines are difficult coming down the hill to where the chowder pot is. I know that that's a lower area. I think that's going to be the challenge, is to create that corner in a way that's not going to feel like a corridor development strip. That's why I say campus, because there's a lot of good projects where you come off the highway and it's a very internal campus, and everybody knows it's there. You don't need the frontage to know that there's the restaurant there. You can accomplish that with signage, and I think that will go a long way to, minimizing the impact on the 2 corners at Leeds Island Road and East Haven, East Main Street and East Industrial. So I really am going to be looking at the traffic considerations as you move forward. And to Sharon's, point, what the tree balance count is. I'm sure you're going to introduce lots of new plant material and shrubs and natives, and we can ecologically make this go forward. The one experience I've had with geothermal came years ago, in New York, and they were encouraging geothermal, and they were digging these really deep wells to bring in geothermal, and nobody was considering the impact that the geothermal had on the root zones of the trees and what that would do to the survivability. So if you start to investigate that, I would be very curious about what the current thinking is on that in particular. I do think Sharon's suggestion for solar arrays in the parking lot, even though they're they're really not going to be stuck there in the winter. They're shopping for like an hour, but solar arrays in the parking lot or solar arrays on the roof are a good environmental use, especially if it's an internally focused project, because then we're not looking at them from East Main Street. I think also that we want to protect the experience of a very bucolic sense of East Main Street in particular. So not having, this sense of parking lots butting East Main Street, I don't mind a light because it controls the traffic, but the connectivity and keeping that very landscaped and bucolic, I think, is important, and it's something I'd want to see when we potentially get a tenant across the street at the old Chowder Pot. I think that corner is a very sensitive area, and I think you have opportunities at the doorway where the gas station is along East Industrial that you could develop more. I mean, and this is purely a question relative to how BJ's markets their gas. Can that happen more closer to the building, or does it have to be fronted by the East Industrial, or is one of those sort of not residential, restaurant pads, fast food type pads, a better solution along that frontage? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. We do have there's a lot of a lot of activity in the truck stop that walks to the grocery store that uses the Popeyes, that seems to me like, I don't know what the best use of that portion of the site is, whether it should be strictly dedicated for just the gas purpose, or whether a pad is, and I think that I would be looking for that decision making when you present the plan. So I know I always say a lot. It's what I do.
Well, I appreciate the support of the environmental concerns, and thank you for the information about the farmland, but really what you're doing is you're paving over it. And so, the suggestions of the heat pumps and the solar arrays and geothermal has come a long way. So, there's been a lot of good work with that. So I would just encourage the developers, and instead of restaurants, just now that I'm thinking about it, a recreational space that would attract teenagers might be a really interesting use of the rest of the space, rather than restaurants and a strip mall, because we really need some place for our youth to be able to go and be safe and do something fun. So that might be something interesting to think about as well. Pickleball, well, I know there's courts down the road, but something that
There's the
might.
Y too, across the street.
Yeah, and it's always crowded and overcrowded. So there's obviously people who want to have that kind of activity. So that's just another thought about what to do with the rest of the space.
Barnes and Noble or something. Sure. Do other people have any thoughts before we, that we would like
Joe
to present?
Vayuso?
Joe.
Oh, I
Yep.
mentioned a couple things. Hello?
Yes, Joe.
Joe?
Joe. Yep, you're up.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I was muted or not. Okay. You brought up a good point. That you reminded me of a good point, that a lot of this traffic situation when it was Costco, that a good portion of the customer base was going to be coming from the east or southbound on 95, and getting off exit 56. You can just get right across. You were able to get to Costco without going on Leeds Island Road or East Main, going around. You can just get right from, I think that's Industrial Park Road or something, North Industrial, whatever that road is.
East
From
Industrial
where the
Road.
truck, what is it?
East Industrial Road.
East Industrial, that's what it is. So, I mean, you got that green area that looks like something is going on over there behind Stop and Shop. I don't know what that is over there, but I think from East Industrial Park Road there, you have to. I would think you would want to make that a main entrance to get to BJ's without circling around like a horseshoe, going to Leeds Island Road to East Main, to going around in a horseshoe shape to get to to BJ's. You want to stay, when you get off the exit, get right to the property site as soon as possible, or shortest possible way to eliminate a lot of traffic on Route 1 and on Leeds Island Road. So I think some consideration should be made there if this thing is going to go through. But traffic has to be a big issue. It's going to be a big issue here. So that's one of my points I'm thinking of right now. Thank you.
Anyone else got anything? Marcy, you want to keep going?
I know. I just keep seeing stuff. So, I'm just looking at I don't know what's in the corner at the end of the gas bay, and why that turn is such a strong 90-degree turn. That's just sort of a technical thing. I know that there's a considerable about a grade change that you've got to traverse through there, and that there's some drainage, so that's a little bit challenging. I appreciate that. But I'm just looking at the distribution of the parking spaces, and it just seems like you've got a lot of extra parking to the east and south of that restaurant or that other building. And I just, that seems disproportionate to what's needed for the BJ's and what you're proposing for the other properties. So I don't know if that's based on having to maintain a parking calculation overall, but if it's not needed, I wouldn't be afraid to suggest less. I mean, I don't know that the grade through there, maybe you're having perch stormwater, you've got a different way of handling that stormwater through there, but coal Technic units under the parking lot, I know they're a little expensive, but I
This
think that
program is brought
that can be a good way to deal with the stormwater. Because I know that area is tricky through there. I know there's going to be engineering challenges through there, and I want people to not forget and not overlook the fact it's easy to see how the bright green looks like there's all this development, but that existing tree area to the far east, that's an extensive area. There's a lot of wetland in there, and there's also a lot of non-wetland area that they're choosing not to cross over, do any kind of pads or development in, which I want to draw that to people's attention that they've picked their locations for development to the corner and are not trying to develop every inch of the property on the site plan. So I do appreciate that.
Thanks, Marcy. Anyone got any other comments? Okay, Shancy, I think you've heard from the commission, so good luck to you.
Chairman, an illuminating session. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think, what else do we have on our agenda? I think we have a couple of, we have some bond releases. Are we, Jamie or Dan, are we ready to deal with those, or are we going to defer on those?
Jamie Frederick, I believe we're deferring. However, I do see that the zoning enforcement officer has joined the meeting, so I don't know if she has an update.
Is she here?
Hello. Heather Gwinnell, zoning enforcement officer. Hi.
Yes.
Hey, hang on. I think I can probably turn on my screen. There I am. Hello. There's one bond release that is below $5,000, which so that one doesn't need the commission to do, and the other two are not quite ready yet. They'll be ready at the next meeting. So
okay, so we don't need to do anything.
Don't need to do anything until next meeting, and you'll have them.
Okay, great. Okay, then that completes then our other business under agenda. Planners report. Did you have anything, Jamie or Dan?
Not at this time.
Okay. Then I think since it's a special meeting, we can't add to the agenda. So I think we're probably someone want to make a motion to adjourn.
Sharon Hutner will make a motion to adjourn.
We'll just to be technical, we'll make a regular member. Sorry to do
Oh,
that.
sorry.
Yeah.
Fred Russo will make that motion.
I always get caught in that mistake.
Fred makes the motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second, Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All in favor? Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo's in favor.
Joe Vayuzo.
Joe Vayuzo in favor.
Marcy.
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair's also in favor. Good night, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.